Chapter 109. I didn't kill him. Hien stood up and faced them. The recruit who first discovered Hien pointed at him in fear and shouted, "If it wasn't you, then who was it?" At night, I went to the martial arts field to practice my crossbow. I accidentally saw someone riding a horse towards White Moon Mountain. The situation was critical, so I followed him. I fought with him for a while, but he ran away. Before he ran away, he threw this brother down. By the time I saved him, he was already dead. Where did you get this scimitar? Shen Han asked in a deep voice. It belonged to him. He threw the scimitar over. Is he crazy? He gave his weapon to someone else. Can't you think before you lie? Du Mao didn't believe him. No, I think he's very smart, Hien said calmly. Now with this scimitar, I'm the suspect. If the weapon was stuffed into her hands, wouldn't it mean that she was the murderer who killed the recruit? Shen Han stared at Hien. When you went up the mountain, did you bring a weapon? I brought an iron head stick, Hien said. When I rolled down the mountain with this dead brother, I lost it on the road. The chief instructor asked someone to look for it. Maybe they can find it. Shen Han ordered Liang Ping. You take some people to look for it. Be careful, there's a signal. Liang Ping nodded and said yes. Hien felt a little tired and sat down on the chair too. Her injury hadn't fully recovered. After today's torment, the old injury on her waist was aching. She really wanted to rest for a while. After a while, Liang Ping came back with the recruit. He said to Shen Han, Chief Instructor, we didn't find the iron head stick. I think he's lying. Du Mao frowned. He only brought this scimitar when he went up the mountain. Hien secretly sighed. Since the other party came for her, he naturally wouldn't leave any evidence behind. Presumably, when she went to save the recruit, she had already picked up the iron head stick. However, she still had a trick up her sleeve. I suspect that this person is Hu Yuanzhong, Hien said. When I fought with him, the iron head staff hit his right shoulder. As long as we return to the city guard station, we can check if he went out at night and see if there is a wound on his right shoulder. Are you quibbling? A recruit looked at her suspiciously. Hien shrugged. Right now I'm unarmed. There are so many of you. Are you afraid of me? It's a small matter to wrongly accuse me, but it's a big matter to lead a wolf into the house. If the true culprit is hidden among the Liang province guards, perhaps the next person to be assassinated will be you, brother. She spoke neither too fast nor too slow, but her tone was cold. The new recruit who spoke was frightened and didn't dare to continue speaking. Ma Damei looked at Shen Han and said, Chief Instructor, this. To be honest, he quite liked Hien. It was rare for a young man of his age to be so outstanding in all aspects. Moreover, his personality was cheerful and easygoing, without the slightest bit of arrogance. He was very likable. However, this was a matter of life and death, so he couldn't be careless. Bring him back first and see if what he said is true. Shen Han turned around and said, Listen to my orders and go down the mountain immediately. Hien secretly sighed in relief. Fortunately, Shen Han was reasonable and didn't kill him with one blow. When they went down the mountain, the atmosphere was a bit gloomy, perhaps because of the death of one of their companions. Hien asked Ma Damei, Instructor Ma, why are you going up the mountain? Ma Damei had a kind smile on her face and always treated Hien kindly. Even at this time, she still patiently answered his question. A recruit woke up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet and saw someone riding a horse towards Mount Baiyue. He told the chief instructor, and the chief instructor told us to go up the mountain to investigate. Before we came, we didn't know it was you. Wasn't this the same process as when she chased after the masked man? Hien faintly felt that something was wrong, but he didn't say anything. Since you said you fought with the masked man, Ma Damei asked, how was his skill? Very good. If I wasn't injured, I could have caught him if I delayed a little longer. However, this person is cunning and cruel. He used the corpse of his comrades to lure me away and escaped by himself. Hien became angry when he talked about this. Today's incident was all arranged by him. Ma Damei smiled and asked in an ambiguous tone, Young man, although I have always admired you, I have to ask you one thing. What's so special about you that the masked man would go around in such a big circle to slander and scheme against you? What's so special about me? Ian carefully thought about it. She was kind to people and had no conflicts with the recruits of the Liangzhou guards. It was just a few days ago when she quarreled with Hu Yuanzhong. Hu Yuanzhong should be the only person in the Liangzhou guards who was hostile to her. But what did she do? She never directly asked about Hu Yuanzhong's background. At most, she asked him a few questions in a roundabout way. Even if she suspected that he was a Chong person, she didn't reveal any of it. If this was the reason he schemed to frame Hien, wouldn't it be too obvious? Thinking about it, he finally went down the mountain and returned to the Liangzhou guards. In the middle of the night, the Liangzhou guards were bustling with activity. Hien had instructors all around him, so he went to Hu Yuanzhong's room first. Everyone in the room was sleeping. When the instructors told him to get up, he was a bit confused. Xiao Mai groggily called out, "Why are you up so early today? It's not even time yet." When she saw who it was, she was so shocked that she almost put on her shoes the wrong way. Ian didn't hesitate and looked towards the wall. With just one look, his heart sank. A person was curled up on the bed, sleeping soundly. After being woken up, he slowly sat up with sleepy eyes. It was Hu Yuanzhong. He was actually in the room. Shen Han asked the people in the room, "Did any of you see Hu Yuanzhong go out tonight?" No. Brother whose leg is injured, so he sleeps earlier than us every day. I didn't see him go out." Ian looked towards Hongshan. Hongshan lightly shook his head at her. "He really didn't go out?" Shen Han stepped forward with an expressionless face. "Take off your clothes." Hu Yuanzhong was confused, but when Shen Han didn't say anything, he seemed a bit scary. He hesitantly took off his clothes. When he took off his outer garment to his arm, he saw that there was no problem with his right shoulder except for a few small cuts caused by the shrubs. If that iron rod hit him, there would at least be a large bruise. But there was nothing on his right shoulder. It wasn't him. Ian widened his eyes. Not only did he not relax, but his face became even uglier. This was an elimination. It was unknown what role Hu Yuanzhong played in this, but since there was no problem with him, it could only mean one thing. He wasn't just one person. There was a traitor in the Liangzhou guards. That was why this show was so perfect. "Shen Jiaodou," she said coldly. "That person is probably in the Liangzhou guards right now. Hurry up and take people to investigate." "I think the most suspicious person is you." A head instructor stared at her and said, "Earlier, you said that Hu Yuanzhong killed him and called us back to check on his injuries. Now that Hu Yuanzhong has been cleared of suspicion, you want to change to another person. What is your purpose in stalling for time like this?" "I'm not lying." Ian frowned. "As long as you investigate the entire Liangzhou guards, you will know that I'm not lying." "Shut up!" Shen Han shouted. The arguing stopped. Ian looked towards Shen Han. "Shen Jiaodou, you don't believe what I said?" "I only believe my own eyes." Shen Han said, "Come, take her to the dungeon." "Ian, you can lock me up, but you have to investigate the truth. Otherwise, the Liangzhou guards will be in big trouble." "You're already like this and you're still cursing people," a head instructor said angrily. "You're too arrogant." Ian was taken away. The rest of the people in the room wanted to ask but didn't dare to. Xiao Mai and the others had cold expressions. Hu Yuanzhong asked curiously, "Shen Jiaodou, what happened? Did someone die?" Shen Han didn't say anything. He turned around and walked out of the room. The head instructors who followed him out had serious expressions. Liang Ping hesitated for a moment and asked Shen Han, "Head instructor, how do you plan to deal with Hien?" After all, he was a soldier under his command. Liang Ping didn't want to believe that Hien had ulterior motives. However, there were witnesses and evidence. Even if he wanted to exonerate him, he couldn't find a reason. This is a serious matter. Hien's identity is also not ordinary. Shen Han said in a low voice, "Lock him up first. We'll talk about it when the commander-in-chief comes back." Yes, the dungeon of the Liang province guards wasn't big, but it was dark and damp. Because it was winter, people would feel bone-chilling cold when they entered. There was no bed, so they could only sleep on the floor covered with straw. The quilt was also a thin layer of cloth. There were a few holes in it. It was unknown whether they were bitten by rats or something else. Hien sat on the floor and looked around. There was no one else in this dungeon other than her. The lock of the dungeon was specially made. It wasn't as simple as the one in her and Xiaoju's room. With one look, He knew that she couldn't open it. After being reborn, she didn't even have the chance to show off her skills before she was sent to prison. She should have sighed and lamented, but at this moment, He wasn't in the mood. She was now certain that there was a traitor in the Liang province guards. That traitor probably had his eyes on her for a long time. That was why he knew that she went to the martial arts training field every 3 nights. Because of this, it was easy to arrange for people to wait on the horse path and lead her up Mount Baiyue. Whether it was going up the mountain at night or killing the new soldiers, it was all to accuse her of conspiring against the law. As for why Ma Damei had said that they would go to such lengths to slander her, it was because He had discovered the other party's identity as a member of the Chong tribe. She had originally suspected that the rash on Hu Yuanzhong's hand was related to his actions before and after. Later, when she met the masked man on Mount Baiyue, he held a scimitar. It was also a blade technique that the Chong soldiers used. She was 80% certain. Now that He was in prison, there were still Chong people in the Liang province guards. This made her hair stand on end. Xiaoju wasn't in the Liang province guards. The tens of thousands of new soldiers had never truly been on the battlefield. If they encountered the Chong people now, it would be like what she had encountered in Mo County. They would probably be completely wiped out. Since the other party had schemed so meticulously, they must be planning something big. If the news of the Yudo harassing the people in Zhangtai was false and they were trying to lure Xiaoju away, then the Liang province guards were like fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Xiaoju had already been gone for 20 days. Based on the fact that he had discovered that the information was false when he arrived in Zhangtai and rushed back overnight, it would take him another 10 days to reach the Liang province guards. Then the other party must have chosen to make a move within 10 days. They didn't have much time left. He was still locked up in the dungeon, and no one believed her words. When Shen Han ordered people to take her to the dungeon, He had thought of directly fighting them and breaking free of their control. However, if she did that, she wouldn't be the one to kill them. She would really be the one to kill them. She really didn't want to live with the crime of murder on her shoulders. Moreover, the new soldiers of the Liang province guards were all her companions. They stayed together every day. She didn't want to live alone and watch them die for nothing. She didn't know when this chess game had become a dead end. However, she had already quelled the chaos in Western Chong. The Chong soldiers had also suffered great losses in that battle. They wouldn't be able to make a comeback for at least 10 years. Why would they dare to take such a dangerous step? He couldn't understand it either. At this moment, he suddenly heard a noisy voice from outside. "Let me in. I just want to say a few words. My father is the Vice Minister of Internal Servants, official Song. If anything happens, I'll take responsibility." It was Song Taotao's voice. He was startled. Song Taotao usually came to give her pastries and candies every few days. He didn't expect her to know about what happened today. The guard outside said something again. And He heard Song Taotao say unreasonably, "You want to try and stop me again? If you stop me again, I'll tell second young master Xiao that you molested me when he comes back." Something fell to the ground with a clang. In the next moment, He saw a pink dress fly in. Song Taotao said, "Big brother he." "Miss Song." He smiled. Song Taotao threw herself in front of him and hurriedly stuffed 2 steamed buns into Heyan's hands through the bars. "It's too late. I brought you some leftovers from Dr. Shun's dinner. I heard my father say that people in prison don't have food to eat every day. I'm afraid I can't come every day, so I brought 2 for you first. Eat sparingly." Everyone in the Liang province guards thought of her as a murderous demon, but this little girl wasn't afraid of her at all. She was even afraid that she would starve. Heyan's heart was filled with gratitude. He said warmly, "Miss Song, you shouldn't have come." "Why shouldn't I come? I heard from them that you killed someone." "I didn't kill that person." Song Taotao nodded. "I guess so. You're so kind-hearted. You're always willing to help when you see injustice. Why would you kill someone? You must have been plotted against. Don't worry, I'll definitely get you out." Heyan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Miss Song, it's best if you don't get involved in this matter. However, this girl was very stubborn. You're my savior. My father said that a drop of water should be repaid with a spring of water. Right now, the Liang Province Guards instructors are old-fashioned and stubborn. They won't listen to me. When second young master Xiao comes back, I'll talk to him and see if he can help. He Yan thought. It'll probably be too late by the time Xiao Ju comes back. He looked up at Song Tao Tao. The little girl's expression was very serious. He Yan wanted to laugh, but when he thought of the current situation, he couldn't. If the Chong tribe really came and Song Tao Tao fell into their hands, what would happen? He Yan shuddered. Miss Song. After a while she said, since you want to help me, I have a favor to ask of you. What is it? Song Tao Tao looked at her. He Yan sighed softly. We can only treat a dead horse as a living one. In Shen Han's room, Cheng Lisu and Shen Han were confronting each other. Young Master Cheng, please go back. Without the Commander-in-Chief's orders, this one doesn't dare to let He Yan out, Shen Han said helplessly. Cheng Lisu sat in front of his door, blocking the door to prevent him from leaving. He only said, Shen Jiaodo, you have to believe me. Brother, he really can't be the murderer. Du Mao stood to the side and couldn't help but say, Young Master, everyone knows that you and He Yan are close friends. However, when we went up the mountain, there were witnesses and evidence. How can you deny it? Even if the Commander-in-Chief is here, he has to follow the rules. Besides, we haven't said that we'll immediately convict He Yan. Everything will have to wait for the Commander-in-Chief to come back and make a decision. But right now, Uncle isn't even in the Liang Province Guards. Cheng Lisu shouted. It's easy for you to say. Do you know how cold and dark that dungeon was? Brother, he was all alone in there. Do you know how scared he was? Du Mao. Cheng Lisu's words made it sound as if he had been in the dungeon himself and could empathize with him. Besides, it wasn't as if He Yan was all alone in there. With He Yan's temperament, he probably didn't take this matter to heart at all. Cheng Lisu really didn't need to worry about him. Seeing Shen Han's firm attitude, Cheng Lisu had no choice but to take a step back. He said, It's fine if you don't want to let him out, but I have a condition. Shen Han asked, Young Master, what are your orders? The food in the dungeon is too shabby. My brother can't stand such hardships. I won't go overboard. Whatever my brother eats in the dungeon must be provided as usual. There are still 2 more weeks of winter. It's too cold. Give him 2 more blankets and hot water every day. Young Master Cheng, Shen Han interrupted him. This is against the rules. I can't do this and I can't do that. What exactly do you want? At this point, Cheng Lisu also became angry. He stood up and said loudly, If you can't do it, then I'll go myself. I'm telling you, you'll regret treating my brother like this. After he finished speaking, he turned and ran away. The door was slammed shut with a bang. Shen Han couldn't help but feel a headache. A child of this age, especially a young master who was spoiled by his family, was really unbearable. Xiao Ju usually looked cold and harsh, but to be able to spend so much time with Cheng Lisu every day, he could be considered very patient. The remaining instructors in the room all looked at Shen Han. Liang Ping asked, Head instructor, what should we do now? One person had died in the military camp. Although He Yan was now locked up, He Yan's words still caused waves in everyone's hearts. If there really was a spy in the Liangzhou guards, that person was still hiding among the new recruits, and had killed one of their comrades without anyone noticing. It definitely wasn't for fun. Who was this person? Who was the master behind him? What was his purpose? When would he reveal himself? None of this was known. This person could be He Yan, or it could be someone else. If it was He Yan, then it would be easy to handle. If it was someone else, then it would be very bad. Find someone to keep an eye on that Hu Yuanzhong, Shen Han muttered. If He Yan's words are true, then this person will definitely make a move. Ma Demi, I asked, has there been any letter from the Commander-in-Chief in the past few days? Shen Han shook his head. His gaze was also covered in a layer of worry. There had been no news from Zhangtai until now. In the past, this was very rare. Hopefully nothing bad had happened. Cheng Lisu ran out and bumped into someone. That person covered his forehead and said, Io. He scolded. Don't you look where you're going? Chung Lisu took a closer look. It was Song Taotao. He had a stomach full of anger when he was with Shen Han. Now that he saw Song Taotao, he couldn't help but get angry. Who told you to bump into me? Song Taotao rolled her eyes at him. I can't be bothered with you. She walked straight ahead. Stop. Song Taotao turned her head and asked, What are you doing? Are you going to find old Shen? Chung Lisu pointed in the direction of Shen Han's house. Song Taotao turned around and said angrily, Why? Can't I? This time, Chung Lisu was excited. He took a few steps forward and said, Are you pleading for my big brother? Song Taotao glanced at him. Although she didn't like Chung Lisu's good-for-nothing attitude, she couldn't help but admit that this guy cared about Hien quite a lot. Every few days, he would send food to Hien. Hien had a good relationship with him. She said, So what if I am? Don't mention it. Chung Lisu waved his hand and looked depressed. I just came out of old Shen's house. This person is very stubborn. I tried to persuade them, but they didn't believe that my big brother he didn't kill anyone. They also refused to send food and blankets to big brother he. Are you stupid? Song Taotao expected better from him. If they don't agree, can't you go yourself? She glanced at Chung Lisu's dejected expression and said angrily, I already went there and sent steamed buns to big brother he. You don't have to worry. Really? Chung Lisu's eyes lit up. He looked at Song Taotao. I didn't expect you to be so loyal. Song Taotao sneered. Thank you for thinking so highly of me, young Master Chung. After she finished speaking, she continued to walk forward. Hey. Chung Lisu stopped her. Why are you still going to find old Shen? I already said that this person is unreliable. It's better to rely on the two of us. Because of Hien, these two people could now be called the two of us. If Hien was here, he wouldn't dare to believe his ears. I think so too. It's big brother he's fault for trusting him. Song Taotao said helplessly. I was asked to do this by someone. It was big brother he who asked me to find Shen Jiaodo. Big brother asked you to go? Chung Lisu was stunned. Yes. Song Taotao walked around him. So don't disturb me. I'm going to find someone first. After she finished speaking, she ignored Chung Lisu and walked forward. After taking 2 steps, she turned around and walked back to Chung Lisu's side. Song Taotao lowered her voice and whispered in his ear. Big brother he also said that you must not walk around in the Liang province guard for the next few days. If a new soldier comes looking for you, don't go. It's best if you stay by Shen Jiaodo's side at all times. Old Shen? Chung Lisu frowned. Why do I have to follow him? I don't even have enough time to annoy him. This is big brother he's instructions. Song Taotao's expression darkened. You better listen to him. She thought of that youth standing in the dark dungeon and shoving something into her hands. He said worriedly, I'm afraid there are traitors among the Liang province guard. When I'm not here, follow Shen Han and have him protect you. You must be careful. Chapter 110. Hien had been in the dungeon for 2 days. In these 2 days, other than Shen Han who came once, no one else came. Even if Shen Han came, he didn't mention anything about the situation outside. She assumed that nothing had happened for the time being. The more this was the case, the more Hien felt that something was wrong. Unfortunately, the dungeon of the Liang province guards was as solid as a rock. It was hard for her to think of a way to escape. Song Taotao and Chung Lisu were probably under surveillance. She hadn't seen them in these 2 days. To Hien, eating and sleeping coarsely wasn't unbearable. As time passed, the most frightening thing was that the unseen danger was gradually approaching. Unfortunately, no one had noticed it yet. It began to snow in the middle of the night. The snowflakes were as big as goose feathers. They danced in the air and landed on people's bodies. Even their cotton clothes couldn't withstand the bone-piercing cold. 2 sentries stood on the balcony. They couldn't help but rub their hands together and blow air into their palms. Suddenly, a white mist fell in front of them and quickly dissipated. The Liang province guards were in a state of silence. The guard station in winter wasn't as lively as it was in summer. There were no new recruits who went to Wulu River to take a shower at night. There were also no noisy cicadas. There was only the cold of the snow melting on the ground. I'm going to the latrine. One of the sentries stomped his feet. I can't hold it in anymore. His companion urged him. Go quickly and come back quickly. The man put down the drumstick, picked up a knife, and turned to go to the latrine. The snow was heavy. In just a moment, a thick layer of snow had accumulated. When he stepped on it, his shoes were submerged. The cold air climbed from his feet to his head. The sentries shivered from the cold and hurriedly ran to the latrine at the back. There were torches outside the latrine. A few days ago, a new recruit had woken up in the middle of the night to relieve himself. He didn't see the road clearly and slipped on the icy ground, injuring his leg. After that, Shen Han had people set up a fire here to illuminate the road. When the sentries entered, there was another person inside. He glanced at the person under the dim light and smiled. Oh, you're up too? The other person smiled and replied, I just got here. It's too cold. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't hold it in, I wouldn't have made this trip, the sentinel complained. After he was done, he pulled up his pants and was about to walk out. That person was also done and followed him out, one in front of the other. The torches at the door reflected a person's shadow in the snow, swaying back and forth. The sentry casually glanced and saw that the shadow behind him had unknowingly opened his arms. He was startled and was about to shout. With one hand covering his nose and mouth, the person behind him pulled out the knife at his waist and slashed it across the sentry's neck. Blood splattered all over the ground. The young man's body silently fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Without any hesitation, the black shadow bent down and dragged the sentry's corpse away. The snow was getting heavier and heavier. In just a moment, the bloodstains were covered. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, the sentinel walked out again. He grabbed a handful of snow, wiped the blood off the knife, and put it back on his waist. He then tidied up the felt hat on his head and walked up the stairs. On the balcony, his companion was waiting impatiently when he suddenly heard movement. Seeing the sentry who had just gone to the toilet come back, he let out a sigh of relief and scolded. Why were you gone for so long? Did you go to slack off? The sentry shook his head, lowered his head and breathed into his mouth, as if he was too cold to speak. Seeing this, his companion couldn't help but rub his hands. Mother, this is too cold. The sentry pulled his felt hat down very low. Seeing this, his companion scolded. Do you think you won't be cold if you pull your hat down? If you pull it up, you won't even be able to see. How are you going to keep watch like this? He reached out his hand to lift the sentry's hat, but the moment he got close, he suddenly froze. The sentry's clothes were different from the pure red and black of the recruits. At the collar, there was a layer of white border. Now at the white border of the other party's collar, there were 2 red dots. These were not old ink stains. The color was bright, and it was slowly becoming denser. A moment ago, when the other party went to the toilet, there wasn't any. His companion looked at the sentry who had not said a word since he came back. He was about to pull out his knife, but his movements were too slow. The other party actually had 2 knives. One knife, which belonged to the dead sentry, stabbed into his chest. The other knife, with a curved tip, slit open his throat. He couldn't yell out and staggered to the ground. The murderer had already turned and walked down the platform. The sentry crawled on the ground with difficulty, trying to pick up the drumstick that had fallen to the ground. As long as he could grab the drumstick and strike the whistle drum, all of the Liang province guards would wake up. This was the last thing he could do. Blood trailed down his body, a ghastly sight. He used all of his strength to crawl to the drumstick. Holding the drumstick, he wanted to raise his body to strike the drum. He had only raised half his body when suddenly, a wave of intense pain came. Blood splattered onto the drum, and the hand holding the drumstick also fell to the ground. His right hand had been chopped off. The murderer returned and stood in front of him, saying in a low voice, I almost forgot. Not far away, the commotion here seemed to have startled the patrolling soldiers on the other side. Someone yelled, Hello? Are you guys all right? This person pressed down on his felt hat and waved his hand in the distance. I'm fine. I just fell down. Blood was everywhere on the ground. The sentry who had been on the verge of death just now had his eyes wide open. He was completely dead. The night was like an abyss, closing in on all of the Liang province guards. The next morning at dawn, The new soldiers got up to eat and went for a morning run at the practice field. Hong Shan and Xiao Mai sat together to eat. Not long after, Wang Ba, Huang Xiong, and Jiang Jiao also arrived. Huang Xiong asked, "He Yan hasn't been released yet." Hong Shan shook his head. "This can't go on," Jiang Jiao said. "It's been unusually cold these days. I heard from young Master Chung that there's nothing in the dungeon. Even if he doesn't freeze to death, he'll get sick." In the end, they were comrades who had fought for the flag together. Even though they had complained about He Yan because of the green hat incident, when it really came to this point, they weren't completely without worry. "Do you guys think He Yan will be released after the commander-in-chief returns?" Wang Ba asked. "It's hard to say," Shi Tu answered. "Why?" Wang Ba was curious. Right now, all of the Liang province guards know that He Yan killed people, but no one can find evidence that he didn't kill anyone. Hong Shan sighed. "What evidence does he need? He's not an idiot. He killed people but didn't bury them. Why would he purposely leave the corpses for others to use? This is the evidence." Xiao Mai whispered. "This is too far-fetched." Wang Ba glared. "How is it far-fetched? Tell me, how is it far-fetched?" As they spoke, a commotion suddenly came from outside, mixed with someone's cry of alarm. "Someone died. Someone died. Quick, go find the instructor." What? Everyone went out to take a look. They saw a short, quick-witted recruit anxiously saying, "The practice field, the brothers on sentry duty at the practice field are all dead." They were all dead. Everyone's expression changed. They all got up and rushed to the practice field. Inside the practice field, blood flowed like a river. No one knew when the snow had stopped. Some of the blood was buried by the snow, while some had frozen and landed on the practice field. The brutal acts of last night could be vaguely seen. There were dozens of sentries on the platform and around the practice field. Not a single one was left alive. The corpses were placed in the center of the practice field. They were piled up haphazardly, as if they were piling up food for pigs and sheep. The dead soldiers were all killed with a single slash. Their throats were slit. It was extremely tragic. One of the soldiers piled at the top had his right arm cut off neatly at the elbow. This person was wearing a sentinel's uniform. His right arm had been cut off when he wanted to beat the drum. They were all companions who spent day and night with each other. Their lives were taken just a wall away. For a moment, the eyes of everyone in the practice field turned red. Someone said hatefully, "Who did it? If I find out, I'll." Someone's voice sounded. It had a hint of oppressive arrogance. "What will you do?" No one knew when, but from behind the practice field, from the horse path connected to White Moon Mountain, a group of cavalry had arrived. There were about a few hundred people, and at most 1,000 people. The leader was a long-haired man. He was riding on a horse. He wore dark armor and held a scimitar that was half a person's height. His figure was extremely burly and muscular. His shoulders and back were very wide. His nose was very high, and his eyes were a deep blue like lake water. His appearance was different from the people of the Central Plains. When he smiled, he was like a vulture grinding its teeth. It had a sinister bloody aura that made people's hearts palpitate. "Who are you?" the recruits asked. The long-haired man ignored them. He only approached the recruit who had just spoken. "If you find out, what will you do?" His smile had a hint of cruelty and tyranny. The recruit could not help but tremble when he faced this person. He gathered his courage and said, I will definitely seek justice for my dead comrades." "Is that so?" The long-haired man laughed. "How will you seek justice?" Without waiting for the recruit to answer, he raised the scimitar in his hand and chopped down. Dong. A figure swept past and blocked his scimitar. However, the figure was knocked back a few steps by this attack. When he steadied himself, he looked at the long-haired man. "Your Excellency is very bold. You killed people in the Liangzhou Guard." It was Shen Han. "Shen Jiaodou, Chief Instructor Shen is here." The recruits shouted excitedly. They suddenly had a backbone. "Chief Instructor?" The long-haired man looked at Shen Han. "You are the Chief Instructor of the Liangzhou Guard? Who are you?" Shen Han's face was as calm as water. "My name is Rida Muzi. I heard that the general of the Dewei family of generals, General Feng Yan, Xiao Huijin, fought peacefully and was undefeated in hundreds of battles. I specially came to ask for advice. What's wrong? Xiao Huijin doesn't dare to fight? What nonsense are you talking about? A recruit couldn't help but retort. You clearly know that the commander-in-chief isn't here. That's why you dare. Shut up. Du Mao shouted to stop him, but it was too late. Not here? Rida Muzi's eyes narrowed. That's really unfortunate. The instructors looked at each other. Their hearts gradually sank. The so-called asking for advice from Xiao Ju was nothing more than an excuse. This person probably already knew that Xiao Ju wasn't in the Liangzhou Guard, so he brought people here to provoke them. However, there were only 1,000 people at most, facing tens of thousands of Liangzhou soldiers, even if they were recruits who had never been on the battlefield. Wasn't this a bit too arrogant? Or was there another conspiracy? The sentries were all killed in one night. If it was an enemy, it was impossible for them to do this. Unless there really was a traitor, and they died at the hands of their own people. Madame, I said in a low voice. Hien is telling the truth. Hien was telling the truth. They had been watching Hu Yuanzhong these days, but Hu Yuanzhong had been well-behaved and hadn't made any strange movements. If he still had accomplices hiding among the recruits, everything made sense. Get into formation, Shen Han ordered. The tens of thousands of elite soldiers behind him all drew their weapons. Since the other party had come with ill intentions, the men of Dawei had no reason to retreat. Rida Muzi saw this and laughed loudly. He said, Hey, head instructor, I didn't come here to fight with you. You seem to be from the Chang tribe. Shen Han sneered. Many years ago, General Fei Hong and the Chang tribe fought. I thought that the Chang tribe no longer had any intentions of betrayal. Now that you've come to the Liangzhou Guard and killed dozens of my men, you can't be here to ask for peace, right? At the mention of General Fei Hong, Rida Muzi's expression changed slightly. After a while he stared at Shen Han and said with a sinister smile, Head instructor, don't slander me. I only wanted to learn from Xiao Huijin, who knew that when I passed by this place last night, the sentries here were too unfriendly and got into an argument with my brothers. I had no choice but to kill them all. He said casually, I thought that Xiao Huijin's soldiers were more or less capable. I didn't expect them to be so weak. When they died, they didn't even make a sound. You. The recruits were filled with righteous indignation. Head instructor, please don't be angry. I'm really only here to learn from each other. He looked at the recruits behind Shen Han with great interest. If Xiao Huijin doesn't want to fight, then let his soldiers fight. If that doesn't work, then you instructors are fine too. Liang Ping took a step forward. You think too highly of yourself. Why are you so sure that we will fight? You don't want to. Rida Muzi clapped his hands calmly. A few people walked over from afar. One of them struggled and said, Let me go. Shen Han's expression suddenly changed. A few foreign soldiers carried two people like chickens. One of them was Cheng Lisu, and the other was Song Taotao. Both of their hands and feet were tied behind their backs. They were in a sorry state and were struggling endlessly. Shin Jiaodo. When Cheng Lisu saw Shen Han, it was as if she saw her savior. She shouted, Who are they? Why did they tie us up? Who were they? Shen Han felt bitter. He had already sent many people to guard Cheng Lisu and Song Taotao's door to protect them secretly. However, they were still captured. The other party's strength was not to be underestimated. They knew how to capture Cheng Lisu and Song Taotao to restrict the Liang province guards. It was obvious that they were very familiar with the Liang province guards. Now, Rida Muzi looked at Shen Han's expression with satisfaction. Head instructor, are you still willing to learn from us? Song Taotao shouted. How can we learn from each other? Why would they be so kind? There must be a trap. Shen Han said, Okay. Straightforward. Rida Muzi sat up straight. The weather is too cold. I'm too lazy to fight too much. 3 matches. You can pick 3 people, he said to the people behind him. Brothers, who is willing to go up? Go. Someone behind him said. Commander, Wallah is willing to fight. This was a very well-built man. The Chang people had always been physically strong. When compared to the people of the Central Plains, they looked especially thin and weak. He was not old, only in his early 20s. However, he was 9 feet tall, like an ancient giant. He also had a ferocious look. His eyes were slightly protruding like a bull's. He held a curved sword in his hand. At first glance, it was obvious that he was not someone to be trifled with. Good. Muzi shouted. Wallah is so brave. As expected of the Chang people. He then looked at Shenhan. What about you? The tiles were so strange and huge that anyone who looked at them would want to retreat. Moreover, the corpses on the training ground clearly showed how cruel the Chang people were. For a moment, no one in the Liang province guard responded. If no one is willing to fight, then your head instructor will do it. Muzi smiled. This kind of battlefield is a good time to teach the recruits. On the side, Liang Ping gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to fight, a voice rang out. Let me do it. This was a young recruit from the vanguard. His name was Wei Huan. Shenhan still remembered this person because his knife skills were outstanding. He was one of the best in the vanguard. However, his personality was very gentle and shy. He was not as outstanding as Lei Ho. Therefore, although he and Lei Ho were outstanding, they were far less eye-catching than Lei Ho. Right, speaking of Lei Ho, Shenhan was startled. Where was Lei Ho? You? Muzi glanced at Wei Huan and said with a fake smile. Your courage is commendable. Wei Huan slowly walked forward until he was in front of Wallah. I am willing to spar with you. Wallah smiled. He looked around and saw the high platform of the training field. Let's do it there. The height is good. If I chop off your neck, the people below will be able to see it clearly. Isn't that good? Wei Huan's expression did not change. Wallah laughed loudly and leaped onto the high platform. Let's fight. In the past few days, there had been countless people on the high platform of the training field. However, they were all recruits of the Liang province guards. They sparred with each other. The recruits below the platform were in a relaxed mood. As they watched, they gave pointers. They could see the flaws and the brilliance of each battle. Every battle had something to gain. Because they also knew that there were many more such battles. None of them were as depressing as today. Muzi suddenly thought of something. She looked at Shenhan and said in a voice that everyone could hear. Head instructor, I forgot to tell you. The rules of the Chang tribe are that on the life and death arena, life and death do not matter. Only when one side dies can victory be determined. What? Liang Ping said angrily. Warriors must be prepared to die in battle at any time. This is the highest honor, Muzi said coldly. There are no exceptions. On the platform, Wei Huan slowly unsheathed the knife at his waist and nodded at Wallah. The dungeon was as dark and damp as ever. The guards at the door had disappeared at some point. The dungeon was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The sound of human footsteps was especially ear-piercing. The black shadow walked down the stairs step by step. The shadow of the torch at the door swayed slightly. In the innermost cell, someone was curled up into a ball, sleeping against the wall. She seemed to have caught a cold and was shivering, her lips pale. The black shadow stopped in front of He Yan's cell. There was an empty bowl on the ground. It was unclear whether it had been filled with water or rice. It had been licked clean and the bowl was shining. The thin blanket was very short, and could not even cover her entire body. She was curled up into a ball and her feet were exposed. Her body was trembling slightly, and her face was abnormally pale. The black shadow looked at her for a moment, then reached out and inserted the key into the keyhole. With a click, the lock opened. The person in the cell was still unaware. He walked in. The young man's former high-spirited appearance was completely gone. This appearance was no different from any other prisoner. He seemed to be somewhat regretful, but also somewhat vigilant. He stood in place without moving, staring at the young man's face. The youth did not move. After a while, the black shadow slowly covered her. At this moment, the youth suddenly raised her head, revealing a pair of clear black and white eyes. There was not a hint of sleepiness, and she was very awake. He only had time to say one word. Before the knife in his hand could fall, he felt a pain in his lower body. He had been kicked right in the heart. The pain caused him to kneel on the ground. The next moment, white silk was wrapped around his neck. Yan's voice came from behind him. I've been waiting for you for a long time, Lei Ho. Lei Ho's eyes rolled back in his head, But He Yan's strength was great. His legs were pressed down on Lei Ho's legs, making him unable to move. Seeing that Lei Ho was about to be strangled to death by He Yan suddenly let go. Lei Ho suddenly had space to breathe. He clutched his neck and gasped for air. He saw He Yan walk in 2 or 3 steps in front of him. Like prying open a duck's mouth, He Yan poured something in his mouth. Lei Ho was panting with his mouth open. How could he defend himself against this? He immediately drank the thing without leaving a drop behind. He wanted to say something, but he could not muster the strength in his body. He only felt his whole body go numb. In just a moment, he fainted and did not move anymore. He Yan kicked Lei Ho's face twice. After confirming that this person did not move, he tore the white silk into 2 and tied up Lei Ho's hands and feet. That day, she had asked Song Taotao if she had any weapons on her. But Song Taotao was a girl. How could she carry a knife or a sword with her? She searched her entire body and only had a bottle of knockout drug. She had stolen it from Shen Mushue's table. She thought that if she met a bad person, she could use it. He Yan was desperate and took it. This was not enough. She also borrowed Song Taotao's belt. Song Taotao's belt was bought in Liangzhou by Qi Wu after she returned to the guard station. The material was special. It was extremely sturdy and durable. It was comparable to rope. When necessary, the belt could also strangle someone to death. He Yan thought that since the other party deliberately framed her for murder and sent her to the Liangzhou guard's dungeon, it seemed that they were afraid of her. When she entered the dungeon, the other party would definitely not give up and would come to silence her. She had to carry a weapon on her at all times so that she could counterattack at any time. But all her weapons had been confiscated. She only had the bottle of knockout drug in Song Taotao's belt. This morning, no one came to deliver breakfast. This was very strange. Usually, breakfast would be delivered at this time. Because of Song Taotao and Cheng Lisu's pleas. Although Shen Han did not allow Song Taotao and the others to visit her, he did not treat He Yan harshly. The guard station was usually very punctual. If no one came at this time, something must have happened. He Yan's heart was itching, but he could not go out. He did not know what was happening outside. Later, he gradually calmed down. Since something had happened, the other party might take advantage of the chaos to come here and kill him. Before Song Taotao left, she did not know what she could do to help, so she gave He Yan everything she had, including a box of cosmetic powder. He Yan smeared some on his face, then smeared some on his lips. He curled up into a ball, like a seriously ill prisoner who couldn't get up. Just as she was guessing what had happened outside, she heard footsteps, which led to the scene in front of her. He Yan dragged Lei Ho to a corner and lay down with his face facing the wall. The knockout drug would take effect for 16 hours. During this time, Lei Ho would not wake up. She left the cell, turned around and locked the door. Lei Ho was now a prisoner. Chapter 111. On the martial arts stage, Wei Huan's water dragon saber and Hua La's stone axe were locked in a stalemate. One was a young recruit from the vanguard of the Central Plains, while the other was a brutal veteran of the Western Chang tribe. Even though Wei Huan's saber skills were outstanding, he lacked actual combat experience. Moreover, his opponent was a strong man who could lift 1,000 kilograms. Compared to Wei Huan's agility, Hua La's stone axe was huge and heavy. It seemed to be chopping without any pattern. The stone axe looked clumsy, but he was strong. When Wei Huan dodged, the stone axe smashed into the ground, leaving a crack in the too. Wei Huan's physical strength gradually couldn't keep up. He was young and not as strong as Wala. He couldn't hold on for long with this kind of reckless chopping and smashing. Apart from leaving a scar on Hua La's face, he couldn't even get close to his opponent. After all, his opponent was wearing armor. This was an unfair battle to begin with. More and more wounds appeared on Wei Huan's body, but Tile didn't want to take his life. Every time he was about to hit Wei Huan, he would just miss by a few centimeters. Although he didn't hit any vital points, Wei Huan was still covered in wounds. It was like a cat catching a mouse. Once it caught it, it wasn't in a hurry to eat it. It had to play with the mouse until it was exhausted before it swallowed it. This was simply a one-sided slaughter. Below the stage, Shen Han saw the situation and clenched his fists until they cracked. He was about to step forward, but was stopped by Raidamuzi. The vulture-like muscular man leaned on his horse with a bloodthirsty smile. Instructor, you can't help. Shinhan pulled out his saber. What? You want to fight with me too? Raidamuzi laughed, his gaze sinister. Of course I want to. I'll accompany you to the end. A group of Chang soldiers surrounded the martial arts stage. Once the Liangzhou Guard recruits wanted to help, these Chang soldiers would fight with them. Even if they could, it would be too late. On the stage, Wei Huan's vision was slowly blurring. He was getting slower and slower to dodge the attacks behind him. His strength was quickly draining. He couldn't dodge in time, and was hit in the right leg by Hua La's axe. The pain pierced his heart, but he restrained himself and didn't make a sound. Wala walked in front of him. Wei Huan had no more strength to run. He saw Wala looking down at him like a butcher looking at a lamb on the chopping board. Wala said, Tisk, it's over so quickly. How boring. The people of the Central Plains are so weak. They can't even compare to a finger of the Chang tribe. Wei Huan didn't speak. Large drops of sweat seeped out of his forehead, mixing with the blood on his face. He looked extremely miserable. Don't worry, it won't hurt. Vala licked his lips and stared at him greedily. When this stone hits you, your brain juice will fly out. It's beautiful. But you won't see it. After saying that, he waved his huge axe and went straight for Wei Huan's head. Wei Huan! Madame, I shouted. Before Wei Huan entered the vanguard, he was the one who had led him. He wanted to save Wei Huan but was stopped by a Xichang man. Wei Huan's life was in danger. At this moment, behind the martial arts practice stage, there was a leafy banyan tree. Even though it was winter, it didn't look yellow at all. Everyone was in front of the martial arts practice stage, so they didn't notice when someone was sitting in the banyan tree. By the time she saw it, that person was like a flash of lightning, swinging the towel tied to the tree like a swing. She let go of the towel in midair. Everything happened too quickly. She dashed to the front of the stage and kicked the axe that was aimed at Wei Huan's head. Relying on the inertia, even though Tile's body was strong, he was still knocked back by her sidekick. The axe was heavy and sharp, injuring himself as well. If it wasn't for his outstanding strength that allowed him to stand firm after taking 2 steps back, this stone axe might have cut deeper. Yen. Wei Huan murmured. The Liang Province Guard recruits were also stunned. Yen was locked up in the Liang Province Guard's dungeon because of the White Moon Mountain incident. How did he suddenly appear here? Was he released? Wala looked at the person in front of him. The youth dressed in black had his hands on his hips. He tilted his head and smiled. You are too fierce. If I hadn't acted just now, my brother's head would have been gone. The new recruits of the Liang Province Guard viewed them as a thorn in their side. And because they had wiped out all the sentries, there was a blood feud. When they saw them, the rims of their eyes turned red. The best was Wei Huan's expressionless face, but this youth was all smiles as if nothing had happened. A sliver of interest grew in Wala, as if he had found a new prey. And who are you? He asked. The black-clothed youth brushed his messy hair and smiled. I am Hien. I was first in the Liang Province Guard's battle for the flag. She looked at Wala. Perhaps you don't know what a battle for the flag is. It doesn't matter. You only need to remember that I am first in the Liang Province Guard. First? Below the stage, Raidamuzi looked at her with narrowed eyes. You. In the end, Hien looked too short and skinny. If Wala and Wei Huan stood together like a strong tiger and a lamb, then Hien, who looked even weaker than Wei Huan, was like a chicken and an eagle when compared to Wala. My apologies, I came a bit late. What are you all doing? The youth smiled at Yin Yen. If you were sparring, it would be a waste of resources to find someone else and not me. Wala laughed loudly. You really boast shamelessly. Hien. Shinhan called out to him. Head instructor Shun. Hien looked at him. I've been suppressing a bellyful of anger these past few days with nowhere to vent. It's good to have a fight to vent my anger. Head instructor, please make an exception and stop blocking me. Shinhan had nothing to say. Raidamuzi had come for the new recruits of the Liang State Guard. Since she wasn't willing to let the instructor go, she could only let the new recruits go. Among the new recruits, other than Hien, there weren't many who could fight her. Some had outstanding skills, but lacked actual combat experience. Those with actual combat experience were older, and their stamina was not as good as the younger ones. He Yan's martial arts were peerless, and his mind was nimble. He already had a high chance of winning. It was good that he had attracted the attention of the Chang people on the stage. More importantly, He Yan said, "May I ask if we are sparring now? If that's the case, how about I replace this brother of mine?" "You? That's right. I am the first in the Liang Province Guard. Defeating me is better than defeating him." He Yan glanced at Wei Huan on the ground. "Won't you feel more accomplished?" The Western Chang people below the stage laughed loudly. Raida Musi looked at him. "I really like this person's temperament. Let him go," He Yan said. "Men, please carry this brother away." Wei Huan was carried away. As he was being carried away, he looked at He Yan and said in a low voice, "You, be careful." He Yan said, "Got it." On the high platform of the martial arts practice field, there were only 2 people left. As the recruits below the stage watched, they all broke out in cold sweat for He Yan. In the past half a year, He Yan had been in the limelight more than once or twice. Some people sincerely admired and worshipped her, while others were jealous of her. However, at this moment, the Liang Province Guard recruits were united against a common enemy. They only hoped that she could defeat them. Voila! Show those Chang people who are not to be trifled with. Let them know that the Liang Province Guard is not to be trifled with. The recruits below the stage were on tenterhooks, but He Yan on the stage was still undecided. She smiled and said, "Oh right, I don't know what the stakes are for this competition. I'll say it first. How about this? If I lose, I'll be at your disposal. If you lose," she thought of the youth in her memory and laughed. She said casually, "You have to call me father." At this moment, the new recruits of the Liang Province Guard burst into laughter. Liang Ping was both worried and proud. "You're still joking at a time like this." However, no one on Raida Musi's side could laugh. Walla looked at He Yan darkly. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said, "We don't need stakes. There will be 3 rounds. The loser will die, and the winner will live. This is the rule. Regardless of life or death," He Yan said. "Why are you scared?" "Not really," He Yan said. "Instructor, throw me a steel whip. I want a long one." Shen Han grabbed the longest steel whip from the weapon rack and threw it over. He Yan caught it and played with it in her hands. She looked at Walla. "Can I use a weapon?" "Yes," Walla sneered. "But are you sure you don't want to use a sword? A whip can't kill." The youth's lips curled. "It's enough to kill you." Before Walla could understand the meaning of her words, he saw the youth suddenly rush over with the whip. Walla was stunned, then laughed loudly. He raised his giant axe to meet the youth head-on. The youth rushed forward but did not make a move. He only lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot to avoid the attack of the stone axe. He circled behind Walla and waited for Walla to turn around before swinging the axe and dodging to the side. She seemed to be taking the initiative, but she didn't attack. The whip coiled around her hand. She seemed to be circling Walla for some reason. In a flash, she turned and ran. Walla followed. As soon as he lifted his foot, he felt something wrapped around his foot. He lost his balance and fell to the side. But this big guy reacted quickly. When he realized that He Yan's whip had coiled around his foot, he tried to steady himself. But He Yan didn't give him the chance. She carried the whip behind her back and pulled it hard as if she was transporting goods. Walla couldn't support himself anymore. His body was huge and clumsy. Both his feet were steady. When one of his legs lost balance, the other leg couldn't be steady. In addition, He Yan pulled from the other side. With a dong sound, he fell to the ground. The whip seemed to be as long as a person. He Yan didn't know how to use it. She pulled the whip from under Wa's body, and it easily returned to her hand. She didn't stop walking. She rushed to Walla and reached out. She wrapped one hand around Wa's neck, and the whip coiled around his neck. Walla subconsciously pulled. He Yan's hands tightened. The strength of his hands couldn't be underestimated after throwing rocks all day long. The strange strong man was wearing armor, but his neck wasn't covered. Ordinary flesh was also the weakest part. After all, he wasn't really made of steel. The people in the martial arts arena only heard a crack that made one's teeth ache. Wa's head drooped limply. "You're not human." You're an animal, Hien said in a low voice. So to kill you a whip is enough. She raised her head again. Although she was smiling, her eyes were cold. She looked at the people below the arena and calmly said, he's dead. I've won. Victory and defeat have been decided. Next. On the martial arts arena, the situation suddenly changed. Just now, Walla had tortured and killed Wei Huan like a cat playing with a mouse. He didn't deliver the final blow for a long time. He probably didn't expect that he would die at the hands of this seemingly weak youth in front of him. How long did it take to kill a person? A cup of tea, a stick of incense, or a quarter of an hour? It didn't take any of those. The recruits of the Liangzhou Guard knew that Hien was powerful. The scene of her sparring with Huang Xiong and Jiang Jiao was still vivid in their minds. However, the Hien in front of them seemed different from the Hien who had sparred on the martial arts arena. When this youth stopped joking, he was cold and chilling. His body carried a murderous aura that couldn't be looked at directly. She smiled and said, "There's no need for fancy performances on the battlefield. Think clearly about how to kill. Then you can act." Her gaze fell on Rida Muzi. Rida Muzi returned her gaze. Slowly, the Liangzhou recruits below the arena came to their senses. One after another, they said excitedly, Hien won. Hien killed Walla. He Dage is amazing. Chung Lisu was caught, but she didn't forget to cheer for Hien. Beat them until their heads were swollen. Liang Ping and Ma Damei looked at each other. Hien's speed of killing was too fast, even for a genius. You guys. That youth stood on the high platform and smiled at the Xichang people. Could it be that you guys can't afford to lose? Who's next? No one from the Xichang people spoke for the time being. She smiled again, this time with a hint of provocation. I know that it's a bit scary to gamble with one's life. I didn't expect that the fearless warriors of Xichang would have a time when they don't dare to go on stage. But it doesn't matter. The people of the Dawei Central Plains have always been kind and benevolent. If you really don't want to admit defeat, just like what I said just now, call me father and this competition will end. How about it? But who's going to call me father? Hien stared at Rida Muzi. You're their leader. Why don't you call me father? Bastard. A soldier behind Rida Muzi stepped forward and shouted angrily. Hien wasn't afraid at all. He said innocently, Can't I do that? Wang Ba said softly. That's so satisfying. She's purposely angering her opponent. Huang Xiong said in a low voice, but in this situation, it doesn't seem necessary. Hien's personality had always been arrogant and confident. In the past, people thought that he was just a teenager. In this situation, angering Rida Muzi wasn't a good thing. I'll compete with you. A voice sounded from behind Rida Muzi. Commander, Bajou is willing to fight. Rida Muzi glanced at him. It was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. She only said go. This man called Bajou went up to the high platform of the martial arts arena. He was different from Walla. Although Bajou was muscular, he wasn't as big as Walla. He was also older than Walla. He was about 30 years old. His whole body was covered in a black cloak. Even his head was hidden under a curtain hat. Half of his chin was exposed. His eyebrows and eyes weren't very clear. His whole person looked pale and strange, like a ghost. His voice was also hoarse, as if it had been burned by fire. It was as unpleasant as a crow's cry. Bajou walked to Wa La's side. Although they were both partners, he didn't have any sympathy. He kicked Wa La's corpse off the high platform of the martial arts arena and scolded, You're a hindrance. Wa La's corpse rolled down. He didn't even look at it. He only said to Hien, You have old injuries. Hien's heart sank. This man called Bajou was more difficult to deal with than Walla. Walla was nothing more than a brute force warrior, who didn't know how to adapt. To deal with this kind of person, as long as one grasped his weakness and attacked, the battle would quickly end. In every battle, the most frightening thing was to meet an enemy with brains like the one in front of him. He was able to discover his opponent's weakness. This way, he would be able to control his next move. He slowly raised the knife in his hand. Hien wrapped the iron whip around his hand and rushed towards his opponent. In the battle between Wei Huan and Walla, Hien was a spectator. He saw Wa La's weakness and shortcomings in advance. Thus, when he fought with Walla, he was able to quickly, accurately, and ruthlessly finish off his opponent. In this match, Bacho was someone she had never seen before. However, this person had seen everything clearly when Bacho fought with her. In other words, Bajo understood Hien, but Hien knew nothing about Bajo. Hien seemed to be hiding many other things under his cloak. Hien was on guard. This person was also very cunning. He didn't directly clash with Hien. With La's example, he kept a distance from Hien. As long as the whip swung towards him, Bajo would quickly change direction. His body was much more agile than La's. For a moment, the iron whip couldn't get close. Hien's waist was already faintly hurting. Previously, when she was in Liangzhou City, she had been injured when she fought with Ding Yi. Later, she was tricked by a traitor to White Moon Mountain and fought with the person hiding in the dark. After several times, the wound that was originally about to heal had long since split open. That wasn't all. After that, she was thrown into the Liangzhou guard's dungeon. In the dungeon, there wouldn't be Shen Muxia delivering medicinal soup every day. It was cold and damp. Her wound had probably worsened. Just now, when she killed Wala, she used too much strength and pulled on her wound. It was fine for a short period of time, but after a long period of fighting with Bajo, she felt more and more pain that pierced her bones. Bajo smiled and said, "Why do you look so pale? Is it because the old injury on your waist is acting up?" Hien was startled. The curved blade in Bajo's hand had already wrapped around her iron whip, pulling Hien forward. The audience below the stage cried out in alarm. With the blade in one hand, Bajo's other hand unhesitatingly struck at the old injury on Hien's waist. Hien received a solid slap, but his movements didn't stop. The whip in his hand loosened, curling towards his face. It was evaded by Bajao, but it rolled off his veiled hat, revealing this person's face. The two of them simultaneously retreated and stood still. That palm was firmly pressed against her old injury. Hien forced herself to swallow the blood in her throat. A slight smile still hung on her face. Looking at the person in front of her, she mocked, "Tisk, so ugly." Without the veiled hat, Bajo's true face was revealed. Half of this person's face was fine and could be considered handsome. However, the other half of his face had been burned by fire and was full of potholes. There were dark red scars that looked like centipedes growing on his face and squeezing his facial features out of place. Below the stage, someone cried out in alarm. Hien had knocked off her veiled hat and exposed her true face. Bajo's expression was extremely ugly. Staring at Hien, he wanted nothing more than to eat Hien's flesh and drink her blood. Hien smiled and crooked her finger at him. Again, Bajo sneered and rushed over. The moment Hien moved, she knew it was not good. Bajo did not show any mercy when he hit her just now. Now blood was seeping out. Fortunately, she had changed into Leiho's black clothes to keep herself warm. Even if she was bleeding, it would not be obvious. But if this continued, she didn't know how long she could last. In fact, the sparring on the stage was never the main point. The main point was to use these three sparring to buy more time. If no one could withstand the scimitar of the Xichang people, it would become a one-sided massacre. Then there would be no chance for the rest of the matches. She must kill Bajo in order to have the third match. The Xichang people were good at using scimitars. Everyone's scimitar would be adjusted according to their body size and strength. Bajo's scimitar tended to be more flexible. It would be difficult for Hien's iron whip to wrap around his scimitar. Hien's whip wrapped around Bajo's leg. Bajo scornfully said, "You are too naive if you think you can use the same move on two people." After saying that, he went around Hien and slashed his scimitar towards Hien's neck. Different from Wala, Bajo was aiming for Hien's life from the beginning. There was no false move at all. Hien pulled the whip with both hands and held Bajo's scimitar in front of his eyes. Bajo laughed sinisterly and fell back. Hien could not dodge in time. He saw Bajo's right hand pull out a dagger from his cloak. This dagger was only as long as a person's thumb. It was as thin as paper. Rather than a dagger, it was more like a blade. If one was not close enough, it would be hard to see it clearly. Bajo loosened his palm. In the eyes of others, he only slapped Hien's waist. But other than Hien, no one knew that the sharp weapon in his palm had pierced into his flesh. Hien only felt a piercing pain in his waist. He clenched his fist and punched. Ba Zhou's face was right in front of him. He laughed sinisterly and said, "Does it hurt? If it hurts, then you." His words stopped abruptly. He clenched his fist and pressed it against Ba Zhou's throat, refusing to let go. Ba Zhou struggled frantically, but unknowingly, the iron whip had tied He Yan's leg to his. He had no way to escape. He struggled fiercely, but the more he struggled, the more his eyes rolled back. In the end, he vomited blood and gradually stopped moving. He Yan's face was expressionless. He pressed his fist against Ba Zhou's throat again. After confirming that the person under him was no longer breathing, he released his hand. There was a little iron-like thing on Ba Zhou's neck. It was just a little bit. The rest could not be seen. It must have been inserted deep into his throat. It was an iron caltrop. He Yan picked it up on the ground when he came here. There were only advantages and no disadvantages to placing some hidden weapons on one's body at any time. No one knew what kind of enemy they would encounter. They also did not know what kind of things they would encounter next. And when they would encounter them, the only thing they could do was to increase their chances of survival. She couldn't get close to Ba Zhou, because Ba Zhou was already on guard against her. Her final strike would be nothing more than a lose-lose strategy that would injure both sides. But she was still better than Ba Zhou. She was only injured by the old dagger wound on her waist. But Ba Zhou was already dead. "You have a trump card. How do you know that I don't?" she muttered. After a while, He Yan pulled the iron whip out from Ba Zhou's body with difficulty. She wrapped it around her wrist again. She stood up. She was wearing a black outfit. It was not as lively as when she was wearing the red outfit. She looked more stern. She also stood up straight. She did not look tired at all. She played with the iron whip on her wrist. She smiled faintly and said the same words as before. "He is dead. I have won. The winner has been decided." Next. Chapter 112. The people below didn't see clearly how He Yan and Ba Zhou were able to determine victory and defeat. They only saw the two of them wrestling. Ba Zhou hit He Yan, and He Yan used some kind of hidden weapon to stab Ba Zhou's neck. Although his method was not honorable, he won in the end. "Big brother, he is so powerful." Chung Lisu was the first to shout. "Good fight. Good fight." "Shut up." Song Taotao scolded him from the side. Chung Lisu was dissatisfied. "What's wrong with me cheering for my big brother? Now is not the time to relax." Song Taotao shook her head. Girls were more observant than boys. She felt that He Yan's face was paler than before. Her heart skipped a beat, thinking that He Yan might be injured. However, He Yan was wearing black, so she could not see where he was injured. On the stage, the young man in black raised his chin slightly and asked with a smile, "No one dares to come up?" At this moment, Musi suddenly laughed out loud. He clapped his hands as he laughed. "Interesting, interesting. I didn't expect there to be such an interesting person in the Liang Province Guards." Before he finished speaking, he rode his horse towards the martial arts stage. His movements were swift, and the people around him were caught off guard. A few Liang Province recruits were almost trampled by his horse, but fortunately, they were pulled back by the people beside them. Musi suddenly stopped his horse when he was one step away from the martial arts stage, and flew onto the stage. He landed in front of He Yan. "Commander, don't tell me you want to fight personally?" The young man was surprised. "I'm just a recruit. How can I do that? You killed two of my brave warriors. You don't look like an ordinary recruit." Musi laughed. He was not at all displeased by the loss of his beloved generals. "I was just lucky. No need to be humble. I saw you fight with the two of them just now. You deserve to be number one in the Liang Province Guards." As Musi spoke, he looked at the people below the martial arts stage and laughed disdainfully. "I think you're the only one here who deserves to be brave and resourceful. However," he changed the topic, "I wonder how long the wound on your waist can last?" He Yan said nothing. Musi looked at her with great interest. "Ba Zhou is my most capable subordinate. He attacked your waist twice in a row just now. It seems that he has an old injury. The last time, when you stabbed the hidden weapon into his throat, he walked to Ba Zhao's side and used his foot to poke at Ba Zhao's corpse. Ba Zhao turned over. His hand loosened. Something stabbed into your waist. Was it a knife? Muko asked her with concern. Ouch, it must be very painful. Actually, it's not that bad. Hien smiled. Not as painful as him. Muko stared at her for a while and smiled. Very good. I like tough bones like you the most. It'll be especially sweet when you're broken. Just like what Basho had done to Wala, he kicked Basho's corpse off the stage and chuckled, useless trash. Then Bajao slowly pulled out the scimitar at his waist. Seeing this, Shenhan's gaze hardened. He said angrily, Muzi as a commander. How can you fight with a recruit of the Liang State Guard? If you want to spar, I'll accompany you. You? Muzi slowly shook her head. Not as good as him. I want him. This is he. Hien. Head instructor Shen let me do it, Hien said. Actually, it didn't matter what she said to Shenhan. Muzi had already set her eyes on Hien. That was the worst thing, but at the same time, it was fortunate enough that they would have more time. Don't you want to change your weapon? Muzi smiled. My scimitar will break your whip. Maybe my whip will break your scimitar, Hien said with a smile. She held the whip in front of her eyes with both hands. The Chang soldiers used scimitars. Everyone's scimitars were different. Muzi's scimitar was extremely long. It was half a person's height. It had been drenched in the blood of countless people. It had a dark red color. As soon as the scimitar was unsheathed, the sunlight fell on it. It smelled of blood. Hien could only choose the whip. In the years she had fought against the Chang people, she had always used a sword. Anyone here who had seen General Fei Hong would be able to recognize that her swordsmanship was exactly the same as General Fei Hong. As for using a scimitar, the Chang people were the best at using scimitars. Using a scimitar in front of them was no different from using one's weakness to attack their strength. It was just asking for trouble. After thinking about it, the iron whip was the most convenient choice. Muzi rushed over with his scimitar. His steps were fast. What didn't match his muscular body was that his movements were very nimble. It was also very clever. The distance was just right where Hien's whip couldn't touch him. Hien's whip wanted to wrap around his scimitar. Muzi dodged it and slashed at the iron whip with his scimitar. Bang! Although the iron whip did not break, it was unavoidably frightening. If this continued, no one knew how long this whip could last. The weapons on the weapons rack were for the soldiers to practice martial arts. It was good as long as they were sturdy and durable. However, Muzi's scimitar was obviously a treasured scimitar. It couldn't be compared. He laughed and slashed with his scimitar. Hien's whip wrapped around the scimitar, but didn't drag it. Muzi was too strong. He said, naive. He pulled the scimitar towards himself. Hien's body couldn't help but fly towards him. Ahigo, be careful. Xiaomai couldn't help but blurt out. Hien flew towards Muzi. Seeing that he was about to collide with Muzi's scimitar, the youth suddenly smiled. He twirled his whip and slipped under the scimitar. He slapped Muzi's face. She borrowed the force of flying over and swept past Muzi's head. She rolled on the ground before stopping. The hearts of the people below the stage finally returned to their stomachs. Muzi slowly turned his head. He was born fierce and ruthless. At this moment, Hien's scimitar on his face made him bleed. Blood flowed down his cheeks. Muzi didn't seem to care. He wiped his face carelessly and licked the blood stains on the side of his lips. He stared at Hien and said, "You are really powerful." His voice was very soft. However, when it fell into the ears of the people, it made their hair stand on end. Hien said, "Same to you." The wound on her waist was very painful. When she rolled just now, the scimitar that pierced into her body was even deeper. However, she couldn't pull out the scimitar now. Firstly, there was no time for her to pull out the scimitar. Secondly, if she pulled it out, the blood wouldn't stop and she would lose her strength soon. But now, Hien wasn't as relaxed as he appeared to be. The scimitar that Bajou had stabbed into her body wasn't long. It was short and delicate, about the width of an index finger. Moreover, it was inserted horizontally. Although it didn't hit a vital point, it just happened to cover the old wound. The original wound split open. When she fought with someone on the martial arts field, it affected her skin and flesh. The scimitar pierced deeper. It was no different from feeling her flesh being cut open while she was awake. She lowered her head and quickly bit her lips. The color of blood appeared on her lips again. It looked like she was that high-spirited youth again. How much longer can you hold on? Raidamuzi wasn't worried. He smiled and said, "Your sweat is about to dry." "Is that so?" Ian touched it. "Maybe the weather is too hot." Raidamuzi slowly raised his scimitar and pounced over with a hideous smile. "Your blood will also be completely drained." Ian rushed up. The Liang province guard recruits below were all on tenterhooks. When Hien faced Raidamuzi, he wasn't as skillful as when he faced the previous two. On the other hand, Raidamuzi was cunning and cruel. No matter how powerful Hien was normally, in the end he was only a 16-year-old half-grown child. Jiang Jiao muttered, "He can't hold on anymore. He might be injured." Huang Xiong frowned. "If there's really no other way," he touched the golden scimitar on his back. "We'll rush up together. We can't just watch him die in vain." Wang Ba scolded. "Fuck. Why didn't these instructors stop him? Why did they let a young boy fight? Aren't they ashamed?" Shen Han stood in the crowd and stared at Hien's figure. The paper in his hand was about to be crushed. Liang Ping beside him was extremely anxious. He whispered, "Head instructor, we can't keep waiting like this. We can't let the Western Chang people take charge. Why don't we? Don't act on your own." Shen Han shouted, "Wait a little longer." Wait. Wait for what? On the stage, Hien and Raidamuzi exchanged more than 10 moves again. Her movements were not as fast as before. It was obvious that she was moving slowly. She grazed Raidamuzi's arm a few times with her scimitar. Every time, she narrowly avoided it, but in the end, she was injured. However, the smile on her face did not change from the beginning to the end. It was as if this was not a bloody battle of life and death. It was just a casual and happy spar with her companions after the day training. This made Raidamuzi puzzled. He said, "Are all Central Plainsmen as good at putting on an act as you?" "Not really." Hien's voice was a little unsteady from the pain. She smiled and said, "I'm especially good at putting on an act." Raidamuzi's smile was not as relaxed as before. Hien did not dare to let down her guard against him. When they fought against the Western Chang people in the past, the other party's commander, Raidamuzi, was brutal and cruel. He reaped countless souls with a scimitar. Wherever he went, bones were piled up. Raidamuzi's favorite thing to do was to chop off the heads of captives with his scimitar and tie them to the tail of his mount. The bloody heads of the dead were enough to become the nightmares of many Central Plainsmen. The Fuyue army led by Hien and the Chang army led by Raidamuzi fought many fierce battles. Every time they fought, Hien could sense how cunning and terrifying the other party was. In the final battle, Raidamuzi died at the hands of Hien. When he was alive, he loved to chop off other people's heads. He probably did not expect that after his death, his head would be chopped off by others and placed in a box inlaid with pearls and jade. He would be brought to the imperial palace in the capital and sent to the emperor. He would become a general in exchange for a generous reward. After Raidamuzi's death, the Western Chang had no leader. Soon the rebellion was quelled, and the man in front of him named Raidamuzi had the same face as Raidamuzi. Hien had seen Raidamuzi die with his own eyes. He would not come back from the dead. Moreover, Raidamuzi's eyes were dark green, while Raidamuzi's eyes were dark blue. Hien recalled that he had heard that Raidamuzi had a twin brother, who was born with brute strength and was vicious. However, he did not get along with Raidamuzi's brother. He left a long time ago and his whereabouts were unknown. Now, it seemed that this was Raidamuzi's twin brother, Raidamuzi. He probably knew about his brother's death. Perhaps he had obtained the remnants of the Chang army, which was why he brought his men to the Liangzhou Guard. He was also cunning. He found out from a spy that Xiao Ju was not in the Liangzhou Guard. The new soldiers here were young and inexperienced. That was why he dared to be so brazen. However, Raidamuzi was not a fool. No matter how brave and arrogant his subordinates were, 1,000 of them could not win against the tens of thousands of elite soldiers of the Liangzhou Guard. Therefore his men should be far more than this. This was a trap that had been set up long ago against the Liangzhou Guard. In front of the guard station was Mount Baiyue, and behind it was Wulu River. If they had an army, It would be impossible for them to cross from Mount Baiue in such heavy snow. Therefore, it was most likely that they would take the closest water route at night and cross over. Hien had never seen Raidamuzi before, but he had fought with Raidamuji many times and knew this person's background. This person loved to set up arenas and say that he wanted to spar with the other party. In reality, his methods were vicious. The martial artists of the Central Plains who walked the righteous path would most likely lose to him. In this way, they would lose their morale before the battle even started. Once they were afraid of the Chang people, they would most likely be defeated. Back then, many Dawei generals had fallen for Raidamuji's tricks. All was fair in war. Morale was the most important. Hien could see that although Raidamuzi was not on good terms with his brothers, his methods were the same as before. The new soldiers of the Liangzhou Guard would not be able to avoid a fierce battle with Raidamuzi's subordinates today. She had already done everything she could. The last thing was to gather enough morale for the men of Dawei on this training field. With morale, they would be able to display their true strength in their first battle. I hate pretentious people of the Central Plains the most. Raidamuzi finally lost his patience. He looked into the distance as if he was waiting for some news. However, he did not receive anything. He turned his head and said, "Let's end this quickly." Hien smiled and said, "That's exactly what I was thinking." She reached out and tied the belt tighter. The belt covered the wound and prevented too much blood from flowing out. However, at the same time, it was more painful and uncomfortable. Raidamuzi looked at her actions and suddenly said, "You remind me of someone." Hien asked, "Who?" "Although I have never seen him, I heard from my unlucky brother that there was a general called Hirufei in the Central Plains. When he was shot on the battlefield, he could pull out the arrow shaft and continue to command the battle. In the end, he died at the hands of Hirufei. You are very similar to that person." Hien heard this and smiled. "Wrong. I am not Hirufei. I am not like him." She glanced at the people of Liangzhou below the stage. "However, the men of Dawei are all like me. As long as they do not die, they will fight to the end. There will be thousands of General Feihong in the Central Plains. Your Western Chang." She looked up and said with a mocking tone, "How many can you produce?" After saying this, she waved her iron whip and charged straight at Raidamuzi. Raidamuzi sneered and did not take it to heart. In his opinion, Hien was already injured. With old and new injuries, she was just an arrow at the end of its flight. Although her endurance was shocking, she could not hold on for much longer. The scimitar and the iron whip intertwined, producing the sound of metal colliding. "Brother he!" Xiaomai's heart tightened as she watched from below the stage. She did not dare to let go. Hien's movements became faster. She waved her whip faster and faster. She was faster than Raidamuzi's scimitar. The scimitar was big and heavy. For an ordinary person, Raidamuzi's movements were already very fast. However, it was not as fast as the iron whip. The whip took advantage of the gap between the scimitar and the scimitar. It came from everywhere and hit Raidamuzi's face. It was only a bloody mark earlier. However, in just a moment, there were several more bloody marks on his face. "Is this all you can do?" Raidamuzi was angered by the continuous whipping. Her expression became violent. The scimitar went straight for Hien's neck. However, Hien was petite and dodged it easily. "You are just a so-so." The young man even had the time to turn his head and tease her. What was going on? Raidamuzi was even more surprised. Why did it seem that as time passed, Hien's movements became faster and faster? Wasn't he injured? How could he still be so agile and not be affected at all? Could it be that he was pretending before? This kid did not have any old injuries at all. Hien dodged the tip of the scimitar. He tiptoed and circled behind Raidamuzi. This person was wearing armor and was incomparably hard. It was not that her whip did not hit Raidamuzi's body. It only landed on the armor and did not leave anything behind. Then from head to toe, it would be as if he had nothing left but a single weakness. She narrowed her eyes and attacked Raidamuzi's back. Raidamuzi turned around and used her scimitar to block Hien's iron whip, sending Hien flying. However, in the blink of an eye, she used the force to pounce on Raidamuzi again. This was simply a suicidal fighting style. She only cared about attacking and did not care about defending. He can't be thinking of perishing together with her, right? Jiang Jiao muttered. In the eyes of outsiders, He Yan, who seemed to be staking everything on a single throw, was actually not that bad. On the contrary, Rida Muzi, who had the upper hand in the beginning, gradually fell into a disadvantage. This young man seemed to know the traces of his scimitar every time. Every time they exchanged blows, he dodged early. He also quickly captured the weakness of Rida Muzi's scimitar skills, and took advantage of the weakness to attack, making Rida Muzi somewhat helpless. How old was he? He looked like he was 15 or 16 years old, but he could see her weakness in an instant. How terrifying was it to have an enemy? If this young man said that there were countless people like him in the Central Plains, what about Xichang? How many people did Xichang send out? There was no such genius, not a single one. In an instant, Rida Muzi actually had the intention to retreat. His morale was low. However, he had wronged He Yan on this point. No matter how powerful He Yan was, he would not be able to quickly determine the trajectory of his opponent's skills after exchanging blows a few times, let alone someone like Rida Muzi. It was perhaps because they were twins by blood, or perhaps because they learned from the same master. Rida Muzi's scimitar skills and Rida Muji's scimitar skills were exactly the same. He Yan had exchanged blows with Rida Muji countless times in his previous life. He knew himself and his enemy, and had long since memorized his moves. At this moment, it was convenient for him to deal with Rida Muzi, and Rida Muzi's fear because of this happened to fall into He Yan's trap. He was just giving him a taste of his own medicine. They were used to attacking the morale of others to boost their own morale. Now that they had finally experienced the feeling of being discouraged, this was a good opportunity. He Yan's whip lashed out faster and faster, to the point that the surrounding people were a little dizzy. Rida Muzi only felt that the iron whip seemed to have become a living snake, circling and dancing in front of him. Its shadow was everywhere. His scimitar swung over, but it hit nothing but air. Instead, he was hit on the forehead by the whip. The real whip was here. He furiously slashed at He Yan, but the youth had already circled behind him. He had also done this when he was dealing with Wala previously. Rida Muzi secretly cursed in his heart, but he saw that the iron whip was already flying in front of him, like a heavy shackle, and was about to wrap around his neck. Then with another twist, his throat would be broken, and he would die like Wala. In the nick of time he shouted, "Kamuji!" This seemed to be the name of one of his subordinates. In the next moment, a woman's exclamation suddenly sounded in the martial arts arena. It was Song Taotao, who was grabbed by the Chang people and threw her onto the martial arts arena. The Chang people had strong bodies and great strength. Song Taotao was only a slender little girl, so she was thrown up like a commodity. If she fell, even if she did not die, she would be seriously injured. No one below the arena could make it in time. He Yan's whip spun in front of Rida Muzi's neck and flew towards Song Taotao. She also threw her body towards Song Taotao. The iron whip wrapped around Song Taotao's body. He Yan flew over and caught Song Taotao in her arms. The two of them fell heavily to the ground together. He Yan supported Song Taotao's body. With this fall, the wound on her waist deepened. She was caught off guard and let out a hiss sound. "Big brother, be careful." Suddenly, Cheng Lisu's shout rang out. "He Yan. Ahigu." Anxious voices came from all directions. Liang Ping's voice was extremely shrill. He Yan turned his head and saw a ray of light coming towards him. When she caught Song Taotao, her back was exposed. Rida Muzi's scimitar fell fiercely, and was about to cut her into two. He Yan pushed Song Taotao away and closed his eyes because of the wind from the scimitar. She no longer had the strength to move. "Go to hell." Bang. There was no pain as expected, and there was no blood splattering. Something knocked the scimitar over, as if someone was blocking in front of her. He Yan slowly opened his eyes. A familiar dark blue figure with a silver-scaled python embroidered with silver thread stood in front of her. A young man stood in front of her. His posture was as straight as a pine tree, and he was calm and reassuring. The long sword in his hand had not been unsheathed. It was crystal clear like snow and flowed with a bright light. It was this narrow and thin autumn drinking sword that brushed away the murderous scimitar. "Commander-in-Chief. Commander-in-Chief. It's the Commander-in-Chief." The crowd below the arena was shocked for a moment, then suddenly became excited. The commander-in-chief is back. Uncle. Xiaoju is back? He-Yan looked over, and felt that her vision was blurry. She could not see clearly. Xiaoju pulled her up from the ground. He-Yan had no strength and leaned on him softly. Xiaoju held her waist. He seemed to have noticed something and looked down. The young man in black seemed to be a little weak, but he didn't have any wounds. But at this moment, the hand that was holding He-Yan's waist felt a wet patch. His hand was stained with blood. He paused slightly and slowly looked at Raidamuzi. However, his words were directed at He-Yan. His tone was as sarcastic as ever. Why do you always get yourself into such a miserable state every time I meet you? He-Yan smiled and said softly. Maybe it's because I know that you will come to save me every time. Chapter 113. Xiao Huaijin. Raidamuzi looked at the person in front of her. Her gaze was uncertain. Fei Nu appeared behind him. Xiaoju handed He-Yan to him. Take them down. Fei Nu supported He-Yan. Song Taotao climbed up and followed behind. The two of them arrived at the arena. There were people all around them. Fei Nu asked He-Yan, "Can you still hold on?" He-Yan nodded. "Sit down first." Fei Nu helped her to sit under a tree. "The doctor will be here soon." Doctor? He-Yan was puzzled. The Liangzhou guards only had one female doctor, Shinmuxia. At this moment, she was being stared at by the Chang soldiers. Beautiful women always attracted attention in the military camp. She looked up at the arena. On the arena? Didn't you want to spar with me? Xiaoju casually drew his sword. His black eyes looked at the person in front of him. He smiled slightly and said, "Go ahead." Raidamuzi asked, "Are you Xiao Huaijin?" Xiaoju smiled. "It's the real deal." Everyone knew that Dewei had two famous generals, General Fengyun Xiao Huaijin and General Feihong Hirufei. However, just as He-Yan had never fought with the southern barbarians, Xiaoju had never fought with the western Chang people. He had heard of his reputation, but it was his first time meeting him face to face. He had never seen Xiaoju's real appearance, and the news he had received before was that Xiaoju had gone to Zhangzhou. It was impossible for him to come back here in the time it took him to travel from Zhangzhou to Liangzhou. However, the sword in his hand did not look like an ordinary sword. Seeing that he did not move, Xiaoju raised his eyebrows. "Are you afraid?" Raidamuzi sneered. "You're just putting on an act." She raised her saber and charged forward. However, the young man did not move at all. The sword in his hand was so cold and sharp that it was unstoppable. His movement was like a falling flower sweeping across, breaking the curved blade. It was so fast and fierce that it dazzled everyone who saw it. Raidamuzi's morale had already been broken when he fought with He-Yan earlier. At this moment, he was even more unable to cope with the situation, and was forced to retreat. The autumn drinker's sword pierced straight into his chest. "Commander!" His subordinates cried out in alarm. Raidamuzi retreated backward. He was not stabbed in the chest by Xiaoju, but his armor was cut open and he was picked up by the tip of the sword. In an instant, his chest was no longer covered by armor. "Warriors of Xichang?" Xiaoju smirked and mocked. "That's all there is to it." Raidamuzi was burning with anger, but he could tell that he was not Xiaoju's match from the exchange of blows just now. The Liangzhou guards were full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. He-Yan was one of them just now. How could a new recruit be so capable? Who knew if there were others? There was no need to continue the sparring on the training field. This time, he had suffered a double loss. He had lost two of his favorite generals and his subordinates had seen him in such a sorry state. Now that his morale was low, any further delay would only cause more trouble. His main task was more important. He turned his head to look below the stage. But why was there no movement? The young man elegantly wiped the blade of his sword and looked at him with a faint smile. "What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for the report of the ambush by the Wulu River?" Raidamuzi was shocked and slowly raised his head. "Then I'm afraid you'll be disappointed." Xiaoju chuckled. His eyes were indifferent. "Komuji!" Raidamuzi quickly retreated and shouted. "Granary! Granary!" "There's no news." His subordinate's voice carried a hint of panic. "Commander, they're not back yet." Xiaoju was slightly stunned. Below the stage someone laughed. Raidamuzi looked towards the source of the voice and saw the culprit who almost caused her to fall just now. That black-clothed youth called Hien revealed a pleased smile. Her voice was already very weak and soft, but her words were still so annoying. She said, secretly setting fire to other people's granary, this kind of behavior is too despicable. That's why there are archers ready there. Commander, your subordinates won't be able to return. They were already prepared. Raidamuzi suddenly realized that something was wrong. He had prepared early, and thought that he could reel in the net now. Little did he know that the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. He thought that he was the mantis, but he didn't know that there was an oriole behind. He had been tricked. He was afraid that Xiao Ju's trip to Zhangzhou was fake. The Liangzhou guard's inability to withstand a single blow was also fake. Everything was fake. Everything was to trick them. The spy here had been exposed long ago. We've been tricked. Let's go. He shouted to the people below the stage. There's an ambush by the river. Ambush. The soldiers of the Chang tribe were confused. Weren't the ambush by the river their own people? They wanted to capture all the Liangzhou guards recruits in one fell swoop. But what did this mean? Since you're here. Xiao Ju looked at him. Don't leave. Raidamuzi gritted his teeth and held his scimitar in front of him. At this point, the morale of the Western Chang tribe was low and they had fallen into a trap. The only thing they could do was fight to the death. However, there was hope as long as he was alive. If he could escape, he would definitely have a chance to make a comeback in the future. Warriors! He raised his scimitar. Kill them! Kill them all! The soldiers behind him all raised their scimitars and started a massacre. They fought with the Liangzhou guards recruits. Someone secretly set off a signal. The chimney flew up and exploded in the air. Raidamuzi turned around, wanting to take advantage of the chaos to escape. As soon as he turned around, he felt someone press down on his shoulder. Want to run? At this moment, the young commander-in-chief's facial features were stunningly beautiful. However, his smile was indifferent. Can you run? They began to fight. At this moment, they suddenly heard a deafening sound in front of them. Following the sound, they saw an army rushing over from the direction of the Wulu River. They were all dressed in black armor and black clothes. The person at the front was riding a horse and held a war flag with the word South written on it. It's the South Prefecture soldiers. The 9 Flags Battalion. The South Prefecture soldiers are here. Hien could barely keep her eyes open. To prevent her from being hurt in the chaos, Fei Nu supported her and retreated. Hien could only take a quick glance. An endless stream of South Prefecture soldiers came from the river, as if they were endless. Reinforcements are here. Before she fainted, she looked in the direction of Xiao Ju. There was only one thought in her mind. So this was his plan. This was a tragic war. Raidamuzi was not stupid enough to only lead 1,000 soldiers to provoke the Liangzhou guards. He only occupied the village closest to the Wulu River, and crossed the river overnight to set up an ambush. If the recruits of the Liangzhou guards could not hold them off and wanted to retreat, they would be like lambs in a tiger's den. However, man proposes, God disposes. Raidamuzi probably did not expect that when he was sparring with others at the training field, the ambush by the Wulu River did not go well. He originally thought that all the recruits were around the training field. However, for some reason, there was a crossbow team hidden in the forest by the Wulu River. When the Chang people appeared, they fired their arrows. The Chang people were confused and started to fight with the recruits. Then Xiao Ju, who was not supposed to return at this time, suddenly appeared and brought 10,000 South Prefecture soldiers with her. 10,000 soldiers of the Southern House against 10,000 Chang soldiers would not be an easy victory. However, if the Liangzhou Guards recruits were added with high morale and the invincible 9 Flags Battalion, they would be invincible. The situation that was originally thought to be a sure win was turned around in an instant. Raidamuzi's trusted subordinates had all died in battle. He knew that he would not be able to escape today, and did not want to be a captive. Thus he slit his own throat and committed suicide. With the death of their leader, the remaining Chang soldiers quickly abandoned their armor and fled like rats. It ended faster than expected. The training field of the Liangzhou Guards, the foot of Baiwa Mountain, beside the horse path, and by the Wulu River were all corpses. In this battle, the Liangzhou guards also lost many recruits. The most tragic ones were probably the patrolling soldiers who were secretly killed last night. Next was the crossbowmen by the Wulu River. The Chang people were the first to clash with them. The living and lightly injured soldiers helped clean up the battlefield and carried out the corpses of their comrades. The heavily injured were sent to the medical hall and treated by Shen Muxue and her servants. Xiaoju walked out with Shen Han following behind her. "Uncle." Cheng Lisu was brought over by Qi Wu. She rushed over and said in a frightened voice, "Why are you only back now? You scared me to death. I thought I was going to die here today." Before Xiaoju could say anything, Cheng Lisu saw Shen Han behind Xiaoju. She thought about how she had suffered at Shen Han's hands a few days ago. Now that her elder was here, she immediately complained. "Uncle Shen Jiaodou, if it wasn't for Brother He, that blockhead would have started a massacre in the Liangzhou guards. Brother He helped us, but in the end, Shen Jiaodou locked him up in the dungeon. It's too unfair." "Dungeon?" Xiaoju glanced at Shen Han. "What happened?" Shen Han felt a headache coming on. He replied, "It's a long story. The situation was urgent, so I didn't dare to confirm He Yan's identity. You even accused him of murder. In the end, you captured Brother He and released the real murderer. My big brother has forgiven you and saved you today. You will have to apologize to him later." "Enough," Xiaoju scolded. "Qi Wu, take Qing Lisu back." "Uncle, where are you going?" "I'm going to change my clothes." Xiaoju ignored him and said to Shen Han, "Follow me. I have something to ask you." He had rushed back in a hurry. He had not slept or rested. He had just experienced a fierce battle, so his body was covered in blood and dust. As soon as he returned to his room, he quickly bathed and changed into a clean set of clothes. Just as he walked out, he bumped into a young man in white. This young man was about the same age as Xiaoju. He had delicate features and a gentle demeanor. He always had a smile on his face. His clothes were embroidered with a red-crowned crane playing in the water. In the middle of winter, he held a folding fan and waved it gently. He did not mind the cold at all. When he saw Xiaoju, he smiled and said, "Are you injured? Do you want me to take a look?" Xiaoju raised her hand to stop him. "There's no need. There's a dying man next door. Take a look at that one." "Oh." The young man looked at the room next door and revealed an unwilling expression. "I, the white divine physician Lin Shuanghe, have only ever treated women. You are already an exception. We haven't seen each other for a few years. You want me to break the rules as soon as you arrive. Now you even want me to treat your soldiers? How am I any different from those doctors on the streets?" Xiaoju asked. "Are you going or not?" Lin Shuanghe opened his fan with a schwa sound and said reservedly, "Let's go." Shen Han heard this and was surprised. This gentle young man was actually the white divine physician Lin Shuanghe? Lin Shuanghe treated He Yan? If that was the case, then the relationship between He Yan and Xiaoju was not ordinary. Thinking about how he had locked He Yan up in the dungeon, Shen Han could not help but have a headache. This time he had really poked a hornet's nest. The few of them went to He Yan's room together. Inside, Song Taotao was sitting in front of the bed and wiping He Yan's sweat. He Yan still hadn't woken up. The mattress under his body was dyed red with blood. No one knew where he was hurt. Song Taotao wanted to help, but in the end, she didn't dare to act rashly. Shen Muxue was treating the seriously ill in the clinic and couldn't leave. Seeing Xiaoju bring a young man over, she immediately said happily, "Second young master Xiao. The doctor is here." Xiaoju said, "You can leave." Song Taotao looked at Lin Shuanghe and was stunned for a moment. Young Master Lin? Shuajing was not small, but it was not big either. Song Xiai and Lin Shuanghe's father knew each other. They had met before and could be considered old acquaintances. "Miss Song, long time no see." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan. "I'm here to treat this little brother." "But you aren't you?" Song Taotao hesitated. "It's true that I only treat women." Lin Shuanghe sighed. "But I was entrusted by someone, so I'll make an exception. This is the only time, and it won't happen again." Song Taotao still wanted to say something, but Xiaoju said to her, "Miss Song, if you have nothing else to say, Please leave so as not to delay the doctor's treatment. Okay. The little girl got up and left. Xiaoju closed the door behind her. Song Taotao looked at the closed door and suddenly realized something. Wasn't Xiaoju still inside? How could he not delay the doctor's treatment if he was inside? How could it be like this? In the room, Lin Shuanghe walked to He Yan's bed and put his suitcase on the small table. As he opened the suitcase, he said, "What is this brother's background? How could he live next to you? Is he very skilled? He looks a little thin." Xiaoju said, "Don't talk nonsense." Lin Shuanghe disagreed. "You didn't have to ask Miss Song to leave just now. It seems that she likes this brother very much. Even if she were to watch from the side, she wouldn't be in the way. Why did you have to ask her to leave and make her anxious outside?" Xiaoju was speechless for a moment. "You think too much. I asked her to leave because I didn't want to scare you." "Scare me?" Lin Shuanghe asked curiously. "Why would I be scared? It's not like it's a difficult disease." As he said this, he reached out to take off He Yan's clothes. Xiaoju stopped his arm. Lin Shuanghe raised his head. "What? Take his pulse first." "He's injured? What pulse?" "I know what's wrong with one look. I have to bandage the wound first." Xiaoju glanced at him. "I said take his pulse first." "Xiao Huaijin, what's wrong with you now?" Lin Shuanghe was confused. "Are you going to control how I practice medicine now? Are you going to do it or not?" Take it, take it, take it." Lin Shuanghe was suppressed by Xiaoju's gaze and had to take He Yan's pulse. As soon as he felt the pulse, his expression changed. At first, he couldn't believe his own feelings, so he checked twice. Finally, he looked at Xiaoju. Xiaoju raised her eyebrows. "That's right." Lin Shuanghe jumped up. "Xiaoju, you're keeping a mistress in your house." Xiaoju frowned and looked outside. "You're so loud. Are you afraid that not enough people know?" "Others don't know. Who knows now?" Lin Shuanghe asked in a low voice. "It's just the two of us." Fei knew. This little sister is not bad. Lin Shuanghe was used to calling all the girls little sisters. He looked at He Yan in a different light. "I was wondering why you let her live next door. It turns out that you have an ulterior motive. What's the relationship between you two? We haven't seen each other for so long. You finally have a girl you like? Why didn't you tell me? Where is she from? Why did she come to the Liangzhou guards? It must be because of you, right? You too. Of course a girl needs to be hurt. You sent her to such a remote place to suffer. Are you even human?" Xiaoju couldn't take it anymore. "Are you done? If you say more, she'll stop breathing. How can you curse a little girl like that?" Lin Shuanghe scolded him. "Come here and help me take off her clothes. Find a piece of cloth to cover the rest of her body. Only her waist is exposed." Xiaoju almost thought that he had misheard. "What did you say?" "Come and help. Although the doctor doesn't have parents, I wouldn't care so much if she was just an ordinary girl. But she's your person. Of course you have to take it off. Otherwise, if something goes wrong in the future, you'll hate me and cause trouble for me." "What do you mean she's my person?" Xiaoju's veins throbbed. "I have nothing to do with her. You're living together." "What do you mean you have nothing to do with her? Since you already know her identity, you must have a close relationship. Hurry up. I just checked her pulse. Her condition isn't good. She's very weak." Lin Shuanghe urged him. "I'll clean her wound with hot water first. Her wound is on her waist." Xiaoju thought about the blood on his hand when he helped He Yan up. He took a deep breath and walked to He Yan's side. After washing his hands, he slowly undid He Yan's clothes. He turned his head and looked at the other side. He didn't look at He Yan. Even so, he couldn't avoid touching He Yan's body. The skin under his hand was delicate and smooth. It was completely different from the skin of the men in the military camp. It was also at this moment that he seemed to realize that He Yan was indeed a girl. This person was usually lively and lively. She called the Liangzhou guards brothers. She also had a straightforward personality. She was even better than the men. Over time, even though he knew she was a girl, he still treated her like a man. His mind flashed back to that night when he discovered He Yan's identity as a girl at the county magistrate's manor in Liangzhou City. In Xiu had cut up his clothes. At that moment, He realized that the body that usually looked strong and unparalleled was actually covered with such white skin. It was so fragile that it couldn't withstand a single blow. He pulled a thin blanket from the side and wrapped He-Yan's upper body in it. He reached out to untie her belt. As soon as he started, he was surprised. He-Yan's belt was a bit too tight. Was it because girls like to be beautiful? Looking at this person's usual behavior, it was impossible. He untied the belt and instantly felt his palms become wet. He-Yan's mattress was stained red. Lin Shuanghe also stopped joking. He reached out to check and was stunned. He said solemnly, "She has a knife on her body." Xiao Ju asked, "What?" Lin Shuanghe took out small golden pliers and silver needles from the box. He used the pliers to gently probe inside. On the mattress, he unfurrowed her brows. She seemed to be awakened by the pain, but in the end, she didn't wake up. The pliers carefully pulled out a thin blade from the wound on her waist. Xiao Ju's eyebrows twitched. Lin Shuanghe said, half ruefully and half admiringly, "This little sister is really strong." Xiao Ju looked at the blade that had been thrown into the plate. It was thin and sharp. She always carried this thing on the martial arts stage? When did she get it? Did she stab it when Rida Muzi fought with her? Or did she stab it before that? If it was before that, in the previous 2 matches, every time He-Yan fought with someone, the blade would pierce deeper. It was as if she was cutting her own flesh. The pain was indescribable. If a normal man couldn't endure it, how could He-Yan endure it? Xiao Ju still remembered that when she arrived, the young man's face was even smiling. She couldn't tell that there was anything wrong. He had fooled everyone. Liars were used to putting on an act, but if she had to lie to herself, she would be a little pitiful. What's the background of this girl? Lin Shuanghe asked Xiao Ju as he cleaned He-Yan's wound. The daughter of the gate commandant. The gate commandant? Lin Shuanghe's hands paused. Why is she here? Because of you? You're thinking too much, Xiao Ju sneered. To build a career. What? She said it herself. Xiao Ju looked out of the window. Lin Shuanghe mulled over her words for a while, but he still couldn't figure out what she meant. He said, "This girl is really amazing. She can endure things that normal people can't. I've been a doctor for so many years and have treated countless women, but this is the first time I've seen someone like her." Lin Shuanghe took out a clean white cloth and bandaged He-Yan's wound. His heart was filled with emotions. The number of women he had treated in Shuo City was uncountable, and there were all kinds of strange illnesses. Some thought that the birthmark on their forehead was ugly and asked him to remove it. Some were weak since they were in their mother's womb, and asked him to prescribe them to nourish their bodies. Some were married for many years without children, and asked him to prescribe them. Some were not favored by their husbands and asked him to create some nourishing recipes to nourish their skin. Those who could afford to hire him were mostly women from wealthy families. They had never suffered in terms of their bodies. Therefore, he was used to seeing the rich and powerful in the world. The scar-ridden dog's tail grass was especially special. "What's your relationship with her?" he asked. Xiao Ju said, "We have no relationship." "If you didn't have a relationship, would you take care of her like this? Even I am being ordered around by you." Lin Shuanghe shook his head and said, "Forget it. What do you plan to do with her in the future? Deal with her. Don't think that just because she's wearing your recruit's uniform, she's really your recruit. I think she's a pretty girl, but look at how she's been tortured. You can't let her stay in your camp as a recruit forever, right? Why don't you send her to Shin Muxia and let her be Shin Muxia's assistant? She can stay by your side and won't have to go to those dangerous places. This girl is weak and delicate. She should be taken care of in the house. You're good. You're ruthless. You're ruthless. Weak." Xiao Ju was amused by his words. She smiled and said slowly, "Before I rushed back, she had just chopped off the heads of 2 Xichang people." Lin Shuanghe was speechless. "If I came back a little later, she would have chopped off the 3rd one." Lin Shuanghe's hand that was bandaging her wound trembled. After a while he laughed and said, "Then it's really true that the real person doesn't show off. Ha ha." Chapter 114. He-Yan's nap was indeed longer than usual. She even had a dream. In the dream, she was fighting with Rida Muji. That commander was brutal and cruel. She pointed a sword at his head, and he suddenly raised his head. It was actually He Rufei's face. The sword in He Yan's hand fell to the ground with a clang. She opened her eyes. Her gaze landed on the soft bed curtains. The mattress beneath her was warm. She lowered her head to look. She was lying on the bed, perfectly fine. He Yan still remembered that before she fainted, she was in the martial arts arena. Xiao Ju and Raida Muji were fighting. In the distance, the reinforcements from the southern prefecture had already arrived. What was the current situation? Was it already over? She propped herself up and slowly sat up. As soon as she moved, she pulled at the wound on her waist. It hurt so much that she couldn't help but furrow her brows. After pausing for a while, she supported herself on the bed and sat up. The wound on her body had already been bandaged. She had returned to her room, the room next to Xiao Ju. There wasn't a single person in the room. She wanted to call someone to ask about the current situation, but she couldn't. Just as she was thinking, the door was pushed open. A young man walked in with medicine. He closed the door and carried the medicine to He Yan's bed. Seeing that He Yan had already sat up, he smiled. "You're awake? Looks like you've recovered well." This was an unfamiliar face. He Yan had seen this person for the first time in the Liang Province Guards. However, looking at his clothes, he definitely wasn't a new soldier. He Yan stared at his face. Her mind went blank for a moment. Suddenly, she came back to her senses and almost blurted out the other party's name. Fortunately, she reacted in time. The words were at the tip of her tongue, but she forcefully swallowed them back down. That person looked at her with a smile and said, "My name is Lin Shuanghe. I'm a doctor, and also Xiao Huijin's friend. I was the one who treated your wound." Seeing that He Yan only stared at him without saying anything, Lin Shuanghe thought for a moment and said, "Don't misunderstand. I didn't take off your clothes. It was Xiao Huijin who did it. I was only responsible for treating your wound. Cough. I also know your true identity." He lowered his voice and leaned closer to He Yan. "Little sister, I really admire you." "He Yan." She nodded at Lin Shuanghe with difficulty. "Thank you. You're welcome." Lin Shuanghe smiled and handed the medicine to her. "Drink it. It's almost cold." He Yan took the bowl and drank the medicine slowly. He could not hide the shock in his heart. Lin Shuanghe actually came to the Liang Province Guard. He Yan was no stranger to Lin Shuanghe. In fact, he was also He Yan's classmate. He Yan felt that she was actually more familiar with Lin Shuanghe than with Xiao Ju among the youths who went to school together in the Xianchang school. There was no other reason. In fact, it was because he was the one who fought with He Yan for the last place in the academy examinations. 8 out of 10 times it was him. Yes, Lin Shuanghe looked like he had an intelligent face. In fact, he was terrible at the civil and military examinations. He was different from He Yan. He Yan worked hard but was still the last place. Lin Shuanghe did not work hard at all. He had a good relationship with Xiao Ju. They were inseparable every day. His homework was copied from his good friend. When the teacher asked him to copy the copybook, he paid someone to help him copy it. The youngsters of the Virtuous Prosperity Mansion were either from wealthy or respectable families. None of them lacked those few coins. However, every time this Lin Shuanghe took out a rare treasure, there would always be people who coveted it. He Yan could not resist the temptation, and helped Lin Shuanghe copy books for an entire night, and received a jade grasshopper. Lin Shuanghe was extremely rich. The Lin family had been practicing medicine for generations. Their ancestors worked in the Imperial Institute of Medicine in the palace. Now Lin Shuanghe's grandfather, Lin Qingtan, was the head of the Imperial Institute of Medicine. Lin Qingtan's youngest son, Lin Mu, was an imperial physician. He was very outstanding in women's medicine, and was deeply loved by the imperial concubines in the palace. Lin Mu also liked to develop secret beauty recipes. He had won the favor of the Empress Dowager, Empress and imperial concubines, and was rewarded from time to time. These rewards were given to Lin Shuanghe. Lin Mu only had Lin Shuanghe as a son and doted on him very much. Lin Shuanghe relied on his family's wealth to spend his days in the Xianchang school. The Lin family did not have high expectations for Lin Shuanghe. They had never thought of asking Lin Shuanghe to be outstanding in civil and military matters. They also did not care about his homework as long as he did not throw his face in front of the Lin family. There was no pressure in the Lin family, and the only people they had to deal with were the teachers in the Xianchang school. Thus Lin Shuanghe's school life was filled with relaxation and contentment from playing with cats and dogs. The debauchee Lin Shuanghe had fallen. Seeing He Yan working so hard, he did not understand. Once when He Yan was busy reciting books, He Yan came over and asked, "Brother He, you are working so hard every day but you are always in the last place. What is the meaning of this?" He Yan ignored him and continued reciting books. Lin Shuanghe was bored and left by himself. After a few days, He Yan went from the last place to the second last place in the academy examinations. He came to find He Yan again and asked, "Brother He, let's make a deal. This time's academy examinations, can you still be in the last place and allow me to be in the second last place?" He Yan. "Why?" "Teacher complained in front of my grandfather, and my grandfather scolded my father. My father ordered that I must improve in the next academy examinations, otherwise he will cut off my source of income. Now I am in the last place. As long as you are in the last place, won't I improve?" He Yan. "Brother He, I beg you." This youth pleaded. "If you help me this time, I will give you the phoenix hairpin bestowed by Imperial concubine Shu." "I don't want." He Yan rejected. "I am not a girl, what do I need the hairpin for?" "You can give it to your mother." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and continued to negotiate with him. "Or you can tell me what you like and I will give it to you as long as you help me this time." "I'm sorry." He Yan shook his head. "I really want to help but I am unable to. Brother Lin, why don't you find Brother Huaijin to help you revise your homework? His homework is so good, and as long as he gives you a few pointers, you will definitely improve." Lin Shuanghe heard this and rolled his eyes. "Spare me please. Who wants his pointers? He only cares about sleeping all day and has no patience. If I want his pointers, I would rather study it myself." Saying that, he sighed. How can there be a person in this world who sleeps all day and is still in the first place? He must be a monster. He Yan looked at Xiaoju, who was sleeping on the desk, and deeply agreed with Lin Shuanghe's words. The heavens must be Xiaoju's biological father. That's why he was so fond of him. Lin Shuanghe hung his head dejectedly and looked very pitiful. He Yan looked at him and felt some compassion in his heart. She said to him, "Actually, you don't have to be discouraged. I have to revise my homework every day. If you don't mind, you can come with me. You can take the homework that I've organized and look at it. It's okay." Saying that, she felt a bit uneasy. "However, I'm not very good at organizing it." Lin Shuanghe looked at her. He Yan felt his hair stand on end. The youth closed his fan. "Okay. What? If I'm going to revise with you, then so be it. I also want to try what it feels like to have a beam hanging over my head." In fact, Lin Shuanghe's popularity in the Xianchang dojo was much better than He Yan's. He didn't wear a mask and didn't act alone. He was elegant and generous with his money. He didn't put on airs and handled things smoothly. He would often treat everyone to delicious food. Moreover, which youth didn't have a mother or sister? If they had a headache or fever, they would have to beg Imperial Physician Lin to treat them. In addition, his grandfather had a good relationship with the nobles in the palace, so no one dared to offend him. Therefore Lin Shuanghe was liked by all the youths. However, liking him was one matter, and revising his homework was another matter. Logically speaking, if Lin Shuanghe wanted to ask for help, there would be many people who were willing to help. But his foundation was too bad. The youths in the Xianchang dojo were all gifted, and didn't have the patience and time to accompany him to revise from the beginning. After a while, no one was willing to take up this tough task. But He Yan wasn't the same. They were about the same. No one was better than the other. Therefore, before the next academy examinations, He Yan and Lin Shuanghe spent the entire day revising their homework. Lin Shuanghe's martial sciences were not good, so he directly gave up. While he was revising with He Yan, he was also revising on the literary subjects. No matter what other people said, they were still decent. In the evening, after school, everyone went to eat. The two of them sat in the classroom, reciting to each other. But this kind of recitation was usually done by Lin Shuanghe, who was sitting with a book in his hand while He Yan recited in a cadence. She said, The way of the university is to be virtuous, to be close to the people, to stop at being virtuous, to know when to stop, then to settle, then to be calm, then to be at peace. The ancient desire to be virtuous, first. Reciting to this point, she forgot what she was going to say. Ian looked at Lin Shuanghe. Lin Shuanghe didn't give her a reminder as he ate the dried fruit while deliberately teasing her. First what? Ian's cheeks turned red as she couldn't remember what she was going to say next. But Lin Shuanghe still urged her. First what? Quickly say it. First down then up. Ian randomly made up a story. Cough, cough, cough. Someone behind them choked on his tea. The two of them turned around and saw Xiaoju lazily propping himself up in front of the table in the dark. Huijin, you haven't left yet? Lin Shuanghe was surprised. I thought you left a long time ago. The young man stood up from the table. He probably just woke up and was still a little drowsy. He walked in front of Hiyan and Lin Shuanghe and casually asked Lin Shuanghe, "What are you doing?" "I'm revising my homework." Lin Shuanghe put his arm around Hiyan's shoulder and said as if they were very familiar with each other, "I've decided to improve together with Brother He." "Revising your homework?" Hiyan asked. "Yes, Brother He also gave me the notes that he sorted out. Brother He is really generous," Lin Shuanghe said. Xiaoju glanced at Hiyan and reached out to pick up the notes on the table. Before Hiyan could stop him, he had already flipped through the notes. It was filled with Hiyan's private summary of what the teacher had said in class on a daily basis. The one that Xiaoju was holding was probably computational classics. Hiyan was very tall, so he could only look up at him. The young man casually flipped to a page. His gaze paused and the corners of his mouth twitched. Hiyan was a little nervous. After a while, Xiaoju put the notes back on the table and said expressionlessly, "There are 5 questions on one page. You got 3 questions wrong." Hiyan, Lin Shuanghe was also at a loss. Xiaoju glanced at the two of them and curled his lips. His tone was not without sarcasm. "You want to improve together?" Lin Shuanghe. He turned and left. Under the mask, Hiyan's face and ears were red. Hiyan still clearly remembered the results of the academy examinations. She and Lin Shuanghe were tied at the bottom. She did not know how Lin Shuanghe went back to report. Whether it was considered improvement or not, no one knew. Now that many years had passed, she did not expect to meet Lin Shuanghe again. It was such a scene. Thousands of miles away from the capital, the Liang State Guards was not a classroom filled with the sound of books. It was a battlefield that had just experienced a massacre. They were no longer unlucky classmates revising their homework together. One was a recruit, and the other was a doctor. How mysterious was fate. Hiyan drank all the medicine in the bowl and put it aside. He looked at the person in front of him. Compared to many years ago, Lin Shuanghe's eyebrows had matured a lot. He had lost some of his youthful immaturity and looked more mature. When he didn't speak, he was an elegant young master. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, his bearing completely collapsed. He moved closer to Hiyan and said with a smile, "Little sister, tell me honestly, did you come to the Liang State Guard for Xiao Huijin?" Hiyan, "What? You like him? So you chased after him to the Liang State Guards?" He said in admiration. "Your courage is commendable." Hiyan was silent for a moment and explained, "It's not like that. I met with some things in the capital and could not stay there. I had no other choice, so I joined the army." Xiaoju and Lin Shuanghe had always had a good relationship. Since Lin Shuanghe knew that she was a woman, Xiaoju must have mentioned these things to Lin Shuanghe. "Then how did he find out that you were a woman?" Lin Shuanghe did not believe her. "I think the relationship between you two is not ordinary. He discovered my identity because Military Governor Xiao is resourceful and suspicious of me. He sent people to the capital to investigate my identity." "Dr. Lin," Hiyan said patiently, "can I ask you for a favor?" Lin Shuanghe said seriously, "Please speak." "Can you not call me little sister in the Liang State Guards? There are too many people here. If my identity is exposed, it will bring trouble to the governor. Normally, you can just call me Brother He." "Little Brother He, this is a small matter. Of course I can." Lin Shuanghe looked at her and shook his head with a sigh. You are a delicate and pretty woman. Why did you come here to suffer instead of staying at home? It makes one's heart ache. Yan. Here it comes again. Speaking of which, Lin Shuanghe really hadn't changed in the slightest when it came to this matter. He was different from Xiaoju. When Xiaoju was young, the number of girls who adored him could line up from the east to the west of the city. However, he didn't give any of them a second glance. Lin Shuanghe was the other extreme. As long as it was a girl, as long as it was a female, no matter if it was a human or an animal, he would return the favor with 120% patience and tenderness. When he called them girls, he didn't call them little sister. It was intimate and tactful, as if he really had so many brothers and sisters in his family. When he was young, there were many girls who tried to get close to Lin Shuanghe using Xiaoju. Lin Shuanghe was not as unreasonable as Xiaoju. He was friendly and amiable, and he didn't get angry over these things. Instead, he was happy to run errands for them. Today, he would help this little sister deliver a flower letter. Tomorrow, he would help this little sister bring a plate of desserts. He was born with good looks. As time went by, some of the girls who originally wanted to get close to Xiaoju had their hearts set on Lin Shuanghe. Of course, Lin Shuanghe was also very principled. No matter if they liked him or not, they were all little sisters. When he was young, he called Yan brother he, in a righteous and awe-inspiring manner. Now that he had changed to a gentle tone and affectionately called him little sister, Yan really couldn't stand it. He immediately had goosebumps all over his body. You haven't recovered from your old injuries, and now you have new ones. Especially that blade, it's very deep. I've treated it for you, but it won't heal in a day or two. For the next few days, you need to stay in bed and recuperate. You don't have to do anything like daily training. Lin Shuanghe looked at her. As for the scars, you don't have to worry too much. Our Lin family has a good way to remove scars and regenerate skin. Although it won't be able to recover to its original appearance, it can still heal 70 to 80%. It won't be too glaring. Yan nodded. Thank you, Dr. Lin. You don't have to thank me. Among all the girls I've treated, you're the one with the most serious injuries and the one with the best pain tolerance. You've really opened my eyes. Also, you're Huijin's friend, so you can treat me as a friend in the future. If you have any difficulties, just let me know. At this point, Yan thought of something and asked, Dr. Lin, is the commander-in-chief here? I have something important to tell him. He's outside. Wait a moment. Lin Shuanghe stood up and opened the door. He said to the people in the courtyard, Xiao Huijin, Yan is looking for you. Xiaoju was talking to Shenhan. When she heard this, she nodded, indicating that she understood. After a while, Shenhan left and walked over. Lin Shuanghe was waiting for him at the door. When he came in, he was about to follow him in. Xiaoju stopped and looked at him. Lin Shuanghe was confused. What do you want? Wait outside. Why? Lin Shuanghe asked. Is there something that I can't hear? Xiaoju glanced at him and said calmly, It's a military secret. Then, she closed the door in Lin Shuanghe's face. Yan. All right, if Lin Shuanghe was here, there were indeed some things that were inconvenient for him to know. Even though they were schoolmates, the current situation in the Liang province guard had made even her frightened. Xiaoju walked over. Yan looked up at him. They hadn't seen each other for half a month, but it felt like a long time had passed. He was still as cold and lazy as ever, as if there hadn't been a battle not long ago. His clothes were still as clean as autumn water. Yan was startled. When he came back to his senses, he said, Commander-in-Chief, Leiho is in the dungeon. I know. He sat down on a chair in front of the bed and looked at Yan. He said carelessly, I've already sent someone to guard him. Yan sighed in relief. Since he had sent someone to guard him, he wasn't afraid that Leiho would kill himself midway. Xiaoju should know this better than him. In reality, ever since he had fought with Leiho during the battle for the flag, Yan had vaguely sensed that something was wrong. However, that feeling was very faint, and she couldn't figure it out until she was locked up in the dungeon. Yan was certain that there was a spy in the Jiangzhou guards who was cooperating with Hu Yuanzhong. After combing through the people he knew, his suspicions once again returned to Leiho. Leiho was a bit strange. During the battle for the flag, she had fought with Leiho. At that time, Lei Ho had used a sword. He Yin remembered very clearly that Lei Ho used his left hand when he used a sword. This wasn't a big deal. Perhaps he was left-handed and was used to using his left hand. However, later on, when Lei Ho entered the Vanguard Battalion, He Yin had also gone to watch the Vanguard Battalion train. At that time, Lei Ho had used a spear with his right hand. If he was left-handed, there was no need for him to deliberately use his right hand, unless he wanted to hide something. He Yin thought about it, and felt that when Lei Ho had used a sword during the battle for the flag, it had been a bit awkward. It seemed that he was more used to using a saber. Using a saber to dance with a sword wasn't that natural. That day, the masked man who had led her to the mountain was the same. Later on, when Muzi led his troops, Lei Ho wanted to go to the dungeon to silence him, but He Yin subdued him instead. He Yin also understood that if Lei Ho was related to the Chang people, then if he used a saber, it would most likely be a scimitar. Perhaps he was afraid of being discovered, so he used a sword at first. However, He Yin was sensitive. Lei Ho might have felt that this was not safe, so he simply used his right hand. It would be harder to find traces. However, He Yin still had some doubts. She asked, "Governor, you went to Zhangtai. Did you come back so quickly?" Even if everything went smoothly in Zhangtai, after going back and forth, he wouldn't have come back at this time. Moreover, he had brought back the Nanfu soldiers. "I didn't go to Zhangtai," Xiaoju said. He Yin looked at him. "The distress signal from Zhangtai was fake," he said. "I went to Qingnan and brought some of the Nanfu soldiers over." He Yin was silent. She had already thought of this when she began to suspect Hu Yuanzhong. This was probably a trap to lure Xiaoju away. When Xiaoju wasn't there, Muzi would lead the Chang people to fight the Liangzhou Guard recruits. How could the recruits who had only trained for half a year be a match for the Chang people? This battle would be difficult to win. However, Muzi would never have dreamed that Xiaoju didn't go to Zhangtai at all. He Yin asked, "Then did you deliberately put Lei Ho into the vanguard? You suspected him for a long time?" Xiaoju curled her lips. "Yes." He Yin was inwardly shocked. In the battle for the flags, she was clearly the one who had taken all 20 flags, but Xiaoju chose Lei Ho, who had been defeated by her, to go to the vanguard. He Yin couldn't understand it no matter how hard he tried. Now, everything suddenly became clear in front of him. Xiaoju had probably already suspected Lei Ho's identity as a traitor at that time, and deliberately made such a good show to lure the snake out of its hole. She actually didn't realize. This was a trap. Bubu was much earlier than all of them. How could Muzi have known that from the beginning? She had already stepped into the trap and couldn't turn back. "Commander-in-Chief, you are so amazing," Yin said sincerely. Although they were both generals, Xiaoju had some skills and he couldn't help but admire her. Xiaoju looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Not as amazing as you." "Yin, me." He crossed his arms and calmly looked at He Yin. "Are you done asking? If you are, then it's my turn." These words were so strange that He Yin didn't understand. He only asked, "What do you mean?" He laughed and took out something from his chest and threw it in front of He Yin. He Yin paused and picked it up to take a look. It was a piece of paper that had been folded in half. On it was a rough map and words. Upon closer inspection, it was the map and words of the Liangzhou Guard. That night when she was locked up in the dungeon, Song Taotao came to visit her. He Yin asked her to help him with something. It was to hand this matter over to Shen Han. At that time, He Yin didn't know what Shen Han would do if he saw this, but the situation was critical, and he didn't have time to think about it. He Yin was prepared for the worst. If she really couldn't get out, or if she couldn't stop the situation from developing, this piece of paper would be her final trump card. Now the trump card was in Xiaoju's hands. "Lady he tilted his head and looked at He Yin with a smile that wasn't a smile. His voice was faint. "Explain." Chapter 115. Explain? How could she explain this? At the time, the situation was critical. He Yin was locked up in the dungeon. She guessed that at this time, the enemy would most likely make a move. She asked Song Taotao to find a pen and paper and wrote a letter to Shen Han. The letter had a map of the Liang province guard drawn on it. He Yin had been there for half a year, so the map was drawn in detail. She guessed that the enemy would cross the Wulu River. She suggested that Shen Han send hundreds to 1,000 archers to hide in the Wulu River and head toward the Liang Province Guard Station in the depths of the forest. Once the enemy crossed the river and came to the Liang Province Guard Station, they would fall into an ambush. At the time, I was framed for murder and sent to the dungeon. He Yan thought for a moment, then explained. Although the others didn't believe me, I felt that the enemy was after something big. Governor, you weren't there. If something really happened, the Liang Province Guard would be in danger. So I drew this map and asked Miss Song to give it to Shen Jiaodo. However, at the time, I wasn't sure if Shen Jiaodo would do as I said. I was just treating a dead horse like a living one. Although Shen Han didn't believe him, he was still cautious when it came to the Liang Province Guard. He had people hide in the depths of the forest, as He Yan said. That was why Rida Muzi's troops fell into an ambush when they came to the training field. They were already at a disadvantage by the shore, and their morale was low. Xiaoju looked up. Why the shore? The small enemy is trapped. To catch a thief, the door must be closed. It's not that I'm afraid it'll be easy, I'm afraid it'll be easy for others to get it. He laughed. You've learned the art of war quite well. What's with the granary? Behind the Liang Province Guard Station is White Moon Mountain, next to the Wulu River. This path is the way out for you, Governor. Further ahead is the path to enter the city. I guess that the enemy was after something big, and the Liang Province Guard Station might not be enough. If we were brought into the enemy's position, the first thing we would do would be to burn the granary. Without supplies, the Liang Province Guard recruits wouldn't be able to last long. They could either be trapped here or enter the city. Once the city gates were opened and the enemy troops entered the city, Liangzhou City would fall. That's why I told Shen Jiaodo in the letter that I ordered people to hide in the dark and guard the granary to prevent anyone from setting fire to it. In fact, Rida Muzi had indeed sent people to set the place on fire, but they were taken down by the Liangzhou recruits who were already prepared. Your guess is very accurate, Xiaoju said slowly. She leaned forward and stared into her eyes. You've planned everything out, young lady. His eyes were deep and serene, as clear as autumn waters. He Yan felt a little uncomfortable looking at them. She didn't know how to respond. Why was she able to come up with such a flawless plan? It was because she had experienced the Chang people's act of burning granaries countless times. As long as they could confirm that the other party was from the Chang, they would naturally know what they would do next. But she couldn't say that to Xiaoju. You seem to know a lot. Did your father teach you the art of war at home? He asked with a smile. He Yan knew that this person was already suspicious, so she simply made up a story. No, I didn't. I learned it all myself. Doesn't the commander-in-chief think that I'm a natural talent? He laughed coldly. Liar, you're lying again, aren't you? The commander-in-chief always suspects that I'm a liar. You should at least show evidence. He Yan became a little bolder. You suspected Lei Ho, so you put Lei Ho into the Vanguard Battalion. Finally, Lei Ho gave himself away. You suspected that there was something wrong with me, so you put me by your side. I'm only separated from the commander-in-chief's room by a wall. Logically speaking, if there was something wrong with me, it would be easier for the commander-in-chief to find out. But until now, other than the fact that I'm a woman, nothing else has happened. The commander-in-chief's words are a little unreasonable. Xiaoju was so angry that he laughed. I'm unreasonable? The commander-in-chief has kept me by your side for so long. Other than my loyalty, alertness, bravery, and wisdom. What else have you discovered? Nothing at all. He Yan spread out his hands. As a general, you should be fair in your rewards and punishments. This time, I can be considered to have solved the crisis of the Liang Province Guards and made a contribution. Shouldn't the commander-in-chief reward me? Reward? He asked slowly. What kind of reward do you want? He Yan sat up straighter and leaned closer to him. His eyes lit up as he stared at him. Can I go to the Nine Flags Battalion? No. He Yan asked why. The Nine Flags Battalion doesn't accept liars who are full of lies, he answered indifferently. I'm not lying, lady. He stared at her with his beautiful eyes and suddenly curved his lips. Although I don't know what you're hiding, he paused, then said, one day, your secret will be revealed. He Yan's heart skipped a beat, and he forgot to answer. He stood up and walked out. He Yan hurriedly said. Then what about Hu Yuanzhong? Xiao Ju didn't stop walking. He's dead, she said, then walked out the door. He Yan was stunned. He's dead? When Xiao Ju went out, Lin Shuanghe was already gone. Only Fei Nu was standing guard outside. Xiao Ju asked, where did Lin Shuanghe go? Dr. Lin said he was going to Lady Shun's place to help make some medicine, Fei Nu answered. The new recruits who died in the Liang province guards have already been settled. The new recruits who died in battle would be buried at the foot of Mount Baiyue. These young lives didn't even have time to experience a real battle before they were slaughtered under a knife in the dark. Xiao Ju pinched the space between her brows. After receiving the news from Zhangtai, he immediately set out for Zhangtai. However, halfway through his journey, he felt that something was wrong. He secretly contacted the commander of the Nine Flags Battalion and learned that Zhangtai was indeed being harassed by the Yudo. However, it wasn't as serious as the letter said. Halfway through, he turned his horse around and sent a portion of the Nanfu soldiers stationed in Qingnan over. The other party must be coming for the Liang province guards, or in other words, coming for him. Right now, he had just taken over the Liang province guards. If something happened to the Liang province guards in Xiao Ju's hands, the emperor would have a valid reason to take back his military power. The ministers in the court who were dissatisfied with him could hit him when he was down. He wouldn't be able to be the commander for long. Those Western Chang people. They're not Western Chang people. Xiao Ju interrupted Fei Nu, they're Yudo. Fei Nu was stunned. Other than Raida Musi and his trusted aides who are Chang people, the others are all Yudo. Fei Nu asked, they're using someone else to kill them? They're trying to kill me, he chuckled and turned around. Tell Shen Han and all the other instructors to come to my room. He Yan rested for a while after Xiao Ju left. Song Taotao, Cheng Lisu and Shen Muxia arrived. The two children each carried a large basket of food. Because the Chang people had just come, the Liang province guards were on high alert and couldn't enter the city. Therefore, there wasn't any good food like the restaurants. However, there was still fish soup and steamed meat. Song Taotao ran to He Yan's bed and asked him, are you feeling better? Not bad, He Yan smiled and said. Thank you for asking Shen Jiaodo for help. The little girl showed a rare shyness. After a while she said, it's nothing. You were in prison at the time. Also you saved me, so we're even. When did my big brother save you? Cheng Lisu still didn't know that Song Taotao had been kidnapped by Sun Ling in Liang province and asked suspiciously. This is a secret. Why should I tell you? Song Taotao didn't treat Cheng Lisu well. That's my big brother. Of course I have the right to know. Why should you hide it from me? Seeing that the two were about to quarrel again, Shen Muxia shook her head helplessly and said to He Yan, little brother I wronged you before. She was talking about Hu Yuanzhong. It's okay, He Yan said. They even hid it from the instructors. It's normal for them to hide it from you. Also, Miss Shen was in a hurry to save him and didn't think too much. Oh right, she thought of something. I heard from military governor Xiao that Hu Yuanzhong is dead? Shen Muxia nodded. That Hu Yuanzhong wanted to kidnap me when Raida Musi appeared. Later, when the commander-in-chief rushed back, the commander-in-chief's guards fought with him. This person died in the hands of the guards. If you knew he was going to die, you wouldn't have bothered to save him and waste medicinal herbs, Cheng Lisu muttered. He Yan thought that Hu Yuanzhong really liked Shen Muxia's beauty and didn't give up on his evil intentions. When the two armies were fighting, he actually wanted to take advantage of the chaos to kidnap her. His intentions were worthy of death. Little brother Shen Muxia looked at her and asked seriously, I don't understand. Why did you suspect that there was something wrong with Hu Yuanzhong at that time? And every suspicion was accurate. After all, at that time, Hu Yuanzhong was well behaved in the Liang province guards. Even though Xiao Mai and the others received He Yan's orders to keep an eye on Hu Yuanzhong every day, they didn't see anything wrong with him. He Yan couldn't say that it was because of the rash on Hu Yuanzhong's hand. It showed that she was very familiar with the Chang people. After a moment of silence, she said, it's the paper with the love poem. Paper? Shen Muxia was stunned. The relic that Hu Yuanzhong's deceased wife left for him? That's right. He Yan said. You were all moved by his deep feelings, But such a person would never look at you with that kind of gaze. What kind of gaze? Shin Wuxia was puzzled. Yan scratched her head. It's the kind of gaze that a man has for a woman. She thought that Shin Wuxia was a girl after all. She was thin-skinned. If she said that she was drooling, it would inevitably make her feel embarrassed. It was better to say it tactfully. But this Miss Shin wasn't an ordinary girl. When she heard this, she didn't feel embarrassed. She just asked curiously, "How did you know?" "Me?" This question was a bit difficult for Hien. She said, "I've been paying attention to Miss Shin." Shin Wuxia frowned. Song Taotao saw that the situation wasn't good. She hurriedly stepped forward to block Hien's gaze from Shin Wuxia. She nonchalantly picked up the cup beside her and handed it to Hien. "Big brother, he drinks some water." "Hien." "Thank you." As they were talking, they heard someone's laughter outside. When they turned around, they saw that Lin Shuanghe had returned. He fanned himself in the middle of winter and walked over gracefully. He had a gentle smile on his face. "I was wondering why it was so lively. It turns out that everyone is here." "Uncle Lin," Cheng Lisu shouted. Lin Shuanghe and Xiao Ju were about the same age. Cheng Lisu and Lin Shuanghe were about the same age. But because she called Xiao Ju uncle, she followed suit and called Lin Shuanghe uncle. However, Lin Shuanghe probably wasn't satisfied with this form of address. His smile faltered and wasn't as smooth as before. Shin Wuxia stood up. "Young Master Lin." "Miss Shin, I just came back from the medical center. A few recruits woke up and were complaining that their wounds hurt. Do you want to take a look?" Shin Wuxia was stunned. "Is that so?" Then she looked at Hien. "Little brother I'll go to the medical center to take a look. Do you feel any discomfort?" No. Before Hien could reply, Song Taotao spoke first. She looked at Shin Wuxia as if she was facing a great enemy. "If there's anything wrong, young Master Lin is here. He will treat it." "Doesn't Uncle Lin only treat women?" Cheng Lisu asked curiously. "Ahem." Lin Shuanghe closed his fan. "Occasionally, I can make an exception. If that's the case, I'll leave first." Shin Wuxia bowed to everyone and turned to leave the room. Song Taotao heaved a sigh of relief. Hien. She had a headache and didn't know what to do. Lin Shuanghe was a smart person. He could tell that she was in a difficult position. He said to Song Taotao and Cheng Lisu, "I'm going to take a look at your big brother He's wounds. After that he needs to rest. It's best if you two don't disturb him." "Resting again?" Cheng Lisu asked. "We just met him, and it hasn't even been a cup of tea's time. I still have something to say to big brother He." "That can only be said after your big brother He recovers." Lin Shuanghe held his shoulder and pushed him towards the door. "Don't tell me you want to watch him lie in bed and never recover?" Song Taotao turned to look at Hien. Hien pretended to be powerless and held his forehead. She bit her lip and pulled Cheng Lisu out. "Since that's the case, let's not disturb him. Let him rest more. We'll come again tomorrow." Cheng Lisu said, "If you want to talk, just talk. Why are you pulling me?" Song Taotao. "Do you think I want to touch you?" The two children left noisily. Lin Shuanghe closed the door. Hien sighed. Lin Shuanghe was really good. After so many years, his ability to read people's body language was still top-notch. No wonder he was so popular in the Xianchang dojo. Hien couldn't help but feel grateful to him for being able to think of what others were thinking. "Little sister, you're really amazing." Lin Shuanghe waved his fan and walked over with a smile. "You're already like this, but you can still make girls fight over you." "Amazing," Hien said weakly. "You flatter me." She wasn't an idiot. Of course, she understood Song Taotao's thoughts. However, a little girl's thoughts were ever-changing. She would probably be fine after a while. "Dr. Lin, did you come to find me for something?" "Nothing." Lin Shuanghe sighed. "There's still blood everywhere in the Liang province guards. The corpses of the Chang people are piling up. My head hurts just looking at them. Although I'm a doctor, I don't like to see blood. I'm very annoyed, so I came to your place to hide." Lin Shuanghe was also a pampered young master. He probably wasn't used to the bitter cold of the Liang province guards. She borrowed Cheng Li's room. It was spacious and comfortable. Perhaps it was because she was injured, but there was a charcoal fire. It was very warm. In comparison, it was more suitable to laze around than outside. Why don't you go find Military Governor Xiao? Yan asked. His room is much more comfortable than mine. I want to go too. Lin Shuanghe shrugged. I bumped into him when I came over. He brought some people to the dungeon. Maybe something happened. I'll go find him when he comes back. The dungeon. Yan was stunned. What? You want to go? Lei Ho was the only one in the dungeon. Xiao Ju probably went to the dungeon to interrogate Lei Ho. She had fought with Lei Ho before, so she might be able to help. Yan said, I want to go. Can young Master Lin help? Originally, I couldn't. Lin Shuanghe waved his fan reservedly. But since it's a request from a beautiful girl, it's fine. He stood up. Let's go. I'll get you a stick to support you. At the entrance of the dungeon, Xiao Ju, Shen Han, and the others were walking in. The number of guards at the entrance had doubled. There were also people watching from inside. They were afraid that Lei Ho would commit suicide in the dungeon. The wind lifted Xiao Ju's clothes. He asked as he walked, Where's Du Mao? He's been locked up as per your orders. Shen Han wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end he said, But regarding Lei Ho's matter, he might not know. With me there's no possibility. Rules are rules. The young man's expression was indifferent. If you're wrong, you have to be punished. Shen Han didn't dare to say anything. When the guards in the dungeon saw Xiao Ju, they made way for him. Xiao Ju took off his cloak and handed it to Fei Nu. Then he looked at the people in the dungeon. When Yan fought with Lei Ho, he fed Lei Ho knockout pills and tied him up with Song Taotao's belt. As a result, when Xiao Ju's men arrived, Lei Ho had yet to wake up. But now, Lei Ho was in a much worse state than Lei Ho when he fought with Yan. His hands and feet were all bound by wooden shackles. He couldn't move. Even his neck couldn't move. He didn't have any strength left. He couldn't bite his tongue to commit suicide. Once he lost the chance to control his own life, he was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Open the door, Xiao Ju said. The guard stood up and opened the door. Even though the door was opened, Lei Ho could only move his mouth. His entire body couldn't move. He looked at the person in front of him. The young man's eyebrows and eyes were unbelievably beautiful under the light. But his gaze was as cold as ice. Don't waste your energy, Lei Ho squeezed out a smile. I won't say anything. The guard moved a chair over and Xiao Ju sat down. He looked down at Lei Ho. His voice was calm. A few months ago, during the battle for the flag on White Moon Mountain, you lost to Yan. But I still chose you to enter the vanguard. Do you know why? Lei Ho's smile froze. He stared at Xiao Ju in disbelief. Xiao Ju raised his eyebrows. You guessed it. You did it on purpose? Lei Ho's voice was hoarse. A recruit who didn't make a sound during the day training. But during the battle for the flag he shocked the world. What are you, a genius? Xiao Ju mocked. Are you that kind of genius? Lei Ho was speechless. He had schemed and racked his brains to enter the Liang State Guards. He had thought of every possible way to enter step by step. He was afraid that he would be exposed. Even at this point he still had the fearlessness to sacrifice himself. But Xiao Ju's words had destroyed his defenses. He had known from the beginning. So everything he did was like a clown. He was led by the nose, but he was still pleased with himself. So what? Lei Ho forced himself to say, Since I'm going to die anyway, I might as well die with some value. Even if it adds a thorn in your heart, it's fine. When I chose you to enter the vanguard, you did something. Xiao Ju casually waved his hand. Fei Nu bent down and took out something from his bosom. He handed it to Xiao Ju. It was a fragrant sachet and a longevity lock. Xiao Ju threw the fragrant sachet in front of Lei Ho. He twirled the longevity lock around his finger, and looked at Lei Ho with a smile that was not a smile. Look, do you recognize it? Lei Ho felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The embroidery on the fragrant sachet was very familiar. It was the work of his wife. Lei Ho had personally ordered a craftsman to make the longevity lock for his son to wear. Xiao Huaijin, he gritted his teeth and said, You shouldn't implicate your wife and children. Wife and children. Xiao Ju played with the longevity lock in his hand and mocked. When you came to do this, Did you still remember that you had a wife and children? Lei Ho gritted his teeth and didn't speak. By doing this, you are tying the lives of your wife and children to your body. If you succeed, you will live together. If you fail, why do you think that you will be the only one who will pay the price? Xiao Huaijin. Lei Ho shouted. He wanted to struggle, but he was restrained by the wooden shackles and couldn't do anything. At this moment, his eyes were red and he shouted, "What are you trying to do?" The young governor looked at him and revealed a mocking smile. "You can tell me everything you know." "Impossible," Lei Ho said. "What a loyal dog." Xiao Ju placed the longevity lock in front of his eyes and observed it carefully. He said indifferently, "Take a guess. If you die, and your wife and children die, do you think the master you serve will avenge you?" "I was the only one who did it." Lei Ho begged desperately. "They don't know anything. Please let them go. Please let them go. It doesn't matter how you want to punish me. It doesn't matter even if you kill me. I beg you. Before you came, you should have thought about the consequences." Xiao Ju said, "As a death warrior, how can you rely on luck? Or you should have hidden them deeper." Lei Ho fell to the ground. De Wei's young killer had a heart as hard as iron. No matter how much he begged, it was impossible for him to soften his heart. He was an emotionless monster. He was cruel and merciless, like a clay sculpture. If he treated his mother and father like this, how could he be expected to have feelings? "What do you want?" he asked weakly. But he knew that he couldn't be as cruel as Xiao Ju. He couldn't ignore the lives of his wife and children. But if he told him, his master would also take revenge. This was a path of no return. If he succeeded, he would live. If he failed, he would die. At this moment, Lei Ho regretted it. "I said, tell me everything you know." Xiao Ju said slowly, "I have a lot of time. Don't worry. You can tell me everything one by one." "What if I don't tell you?" The young man stopped fiddling with the longevity lock. In the next moment, the longevity lock in his hand broke into pieces with a slight creak. He actually crushed the longevity lock with his bare hands. "You can try." His tone was calm, even gentle. He said, "I promise the next time I send you, it won't just be these two dead objects." Lei Ho closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his expression was one of misery. He looked at Xiao Ju and sneered. As expected of General Feng Yun, as expected of the Right Army's commander-in-chief, I, Lei Ho, have experienced your temperament and methods. He Yan was walking to and from the dungeon with Lin Shuanghe. When he reached the door, he heard this sentence. No wonder Xiao Zhongwu and his wife fought for military power before the 7th day of their death. No wonder they didn't even bat an eyelid when 60,000 people were drowned in the Battle of Gua City. In terms of ruthlessness, who in De Wei can compare to Xiao Huaijin? Chapter 116. No wonder Xiao Zhongwu and his wife fought for military power before the 7th day of their death. No wonder they didn't even bat an eyelid when 60,000 people were drowned in the Battle of Gua Valley. In terms of ruthlessness, who in De Wei can compare to Xiao Huaijin? The dungeon was silent for a moment. Shinhan wanted to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. The young man's back was facing the prisoner, and his hands slowly clenched into fists by his side. But after a moment, they slowly relaxed. He turned around and looked at Lei Ho. He smiled indifferently and said, "It seems that you know what kind of person I am. Then you should think about it more clearly." He walked out, his voice cold. "I never give people a second chance." When he reached the door, he happened to see He Yan and Lin Shuanghe standing in the corner. He paused for a moment, then ignored them and left. No one dared to chase after him. Shinhan ordered people to lock Lei Ho back in. It was unknown whether it was the conversation with Xiao Ju that made Lei Ho despair or something else, but Lei Ho laughed bitterly. His laughter echoed in the dungeon, eerie and mournful. Fei Nu walked out. When he saw He Yan and Lin Shuanghe, he was startled and said, "Young Master Lin, why are you here?" "I wanted to say," He Yan looked inside, "I have fought with Lei Ho before. When the governor interrogates Lei Ho, I might be able to help, so I came to take a look." "No need, it's already been solved," Fei Nu replied quickly. "You can go back now." Lin Shuanghe shrugged. When he saw Xiao Ju's cloak in Fei Nu's hands, he took the initiative to take it and said, "This is Huaijin's clothes. I'll send it to him. I don't think he wants to see anyone right now. Fei Nu said. No need to trouble young Master Lin. It's no trouble at all, Lin Shuanghe said. I was just about to look for him later. Fei Nu stopped and nodded to Lin Shuanghe. Thank you, young Master Lin. Lin Shuanghe smiled and said to Hien, let's go. The two of them walked out together. When they came out, it was already snowing lightly. Now the snow was even heavier. Hien was injured, so he walked very slowly. He was still wearing Cheng Lisu's cloak. Although Lin Shuanghe called Hien little sister intimately, he had a sense of propriety when it came to interacting with women. It was as if he was deliberately avoiding arousing suspicion. He didn't even lend his arm to help him up. However, the two of them were not in a hurry, so they walked very slowly. The snowflakes rustled down and hit them. Hien thought about what Lei Ho had said in the dungeon. While he was deep in thought, Lin Shuanghe suddenly asked, have you heard of the Battle of Gua City's Long Valley? Hien was startled, but he immediately replied, I have. The Battle of Gua City's Long Valley was the most important battle, when Xiao Ju led the Nanfu army to quell the chaos of the southern barbarians after Xiao Zhongwu's death. At that time, everyone in Dawei was waiting to see Xiao Ju make a fool of himself. A 16-year-old boy leading so many soldiers against a foreign army that even his father couldn't defeat. No matter how they looked at it, he was bound to lose. Who would have thought that he would win the first battle? Later on, the southern barbarians were forced to retreat. Xiao Ju only took half a year to quell the chaos of the southern barbarians. Do you know how he won the Battle of the Long Valley? Water attack. You know? Hien didn't say anything. Instead, he poked a small hole in the snow with his bamboo stick. Then you also know that during the Battle of the Long Valley, General Feng Yan and Xiao Huijin flooded Gua City, and 60,000 people died. Lin Shuanghe hugged Xiao Ju's black cloak tighter. At that time, corpses were floating in the air, and the east of the city stank. Gua City was like hell on earth. It was unbearable. He smiled and asked, what do you think? Do you think he's cruel and inhumane? Hien said calmly, war is cruel. Being kind to the enemy is being cruel to the people of your own country. Moreover, no one knows the truth before being in that position. If he wasn't cruel and inhumane, we might be the ones drowning now. Lin Shuanghe paused and turned to Hien. Why do you think so? I just think that military governor Xiao isn't that kind of person. Lin Shuanghe stared at Hien as if it was the first time he had seen her. Hien asked, is there anything wrong with what I said? After a while he shook his head and smiled. I'm just surprised that you trusted Huijin so much after spending less than a year with him. Why was I not as firm as you when I first heard about this? Hien thought that it was because Lin Shuanghe had never been to a real battlefield. Only those who had seen fighting on the battlefield would know how difficult it was for a general to make a decision. Xiao Ju was smart and calm. If he didn't have a reason to do so, he wouldn't have done so. Instead, he would have left a bad name for himself. After the Battle of the Long Valley, although Xiao Ju defeated the southern barbarians and was respected by many young people, he was also criticized by many scholars for being heartless and killing too many people. After all, there were also southern barbarians among the people who drowned in the Battle of the Long Valley. Dr. Lin, you seem to know why he did this. Hien asked why. I didn't know it from the start. Lin Shuanghe sighed. Tell me, what other way would he use 3,000 soldiers to fight 60,000 people other than a water attack? 3,000 soldiers? Hien suddenly looked up. Isn't it 100,000 Southern House soldiers? 100,000. Lin Shuanghe smiled. If he had 100,000 Southern House soldiers, he wouldn't have to use this method. When Xiao Zhongwu died, Madame Xiao followed him. For a time, the Xiao mansion was filled with cries and sorrowful cries. At that time, everyone knew that Xiao Zhongwu's defeat at the Battle of the Ming River was because he was stubborn and self-opinionated. He made mistakes in his command and caused tens of thousands of Dawei soldiers to die on the battlefield. His Majesty was merciful. He remembered Xiao family's many years of contributions and did not pursue Xiao Zhongwu's fault. At the same time, he took back military power. At that time, Xiao Ju was only 16 years old and Xiao Jing had just turned 18. Bai Rongwei had married into the family for less than half a year before this disaster happened. For a time, Everyone was in a state of panic and did not know what to do in the future. Lin Shuanghe still remembered the first time he saw Xiaoju after the Xiao family's disaster. The young man was used to having a cold and lazy appearance, as if nothing was on his mind. But he also taught people that there was nothing in the world that could stop him. It was just that if anyone's family suffered such a disaster, they would not be able to recover from it. Even if they were not able to recover, they would still be very different from before. But the Xiaoju that Lin Shuanghe saw was not like that. Other than looking a little more haggard than before, he did not look dispirited or depressed. Do you have medicine that makes people sleep for a whole day? Xiaoju asked. Lin Shuanghe said, my family's medicine shop has it. If you want it, I can get it for you immediately. The Lin family's medicine shops were all over the Dawei. Just in the downtown area of Shuajing, there were a few shops. Lin Shuanghe ordered a servant to go to the nearest medicine shop and get 2 sets of medicine. He handed them to Xiaoju and said, take it and you will sleep for 20 hours. He suddenly thought of something and said, if you can't sleep at night, I can make a milder medicine for you. Perhaps Xiaoju was unable to sleep because of the sudden disaster in his family and wanted to ask for medicine to help him sleep. Xiaoju put the medicine back into his sleeve and waved his hand at him, saying, thank you. He turned and was about to leave. Huaijin, Lin Shuanghe called out to him. Xiaoju stopped and looked at him. This medicine is for you, right? The young man's eyes were exquisite and bright. He looked past him and into the distance. At the end of the distance, the lofty palace was faintly discernible. He said calmly, I want to enter the palace. Lin Shuanghe was not stupid. He immediately understood Xiaoju's intention. He said in horror, you want to enter the palace without telling your brother? Why would I tell him? The young man lowered his head and smiled. It will only make him more worried. You're crazy, Lin Shuanghe said anxiously. Do you know that the court is in chaos because of General Xiao? No one dares to speak for General Xiao. Prime Minister Su has been accompanying His Majesty every day. Do you know why? I know. Xiaoju said, so what? The military power must be returned to the Xiao family. You might lose your life if you do this. Xiaoju turned his head and stared at him. Then I will lose my life. You. That's right, there's something I need your help with. He said. The young man's face rarely showed such a serious expression. Lin Shuanghe's heart was filled with an ominous premonition. He pursed his lips and asked, what is it? If I come back alive, then pretend that this never happened. If I die, he paused. There's no need to collect my corpse. Imperial physician Lin has some influence in front of the Empress Dowager. Please help my brother. This has nothing to do with him. What do you mean you die? Lin Shuanghe heard his own trembling voice. It's very simple. After tonight, if I don't die today, then he will die tomorrow. His expression was calm, as if he was talking about someone else. But I'm not sure of the result. So, he curved his lips. You can pray. Xiao Huaijin. The young man bowed deeply to him. When he straightened up, he only said 2 words. Thank you. Lin Shuanghe's eyes reddened. Xiaoju waved his hand at him. Go back. Lin Shuanghe didn't move. He laughed and turned to leave. That was a long time ago, but Xiaoju's back seemed to stop in front of him. On the bustling streets of the city, the young man's back was tall and straight, but he looked especially lonely. No one knew what kind of path he would take, but Lin Shuanghe was very clear about one thing. Xiaoju wouldn't turn back. He Yan's words interrupted him while he was deep in thought. He Yan asked, so later, the governor entered the palace by himself? Lin Shuanghe came back to his senses and continued to walk forward slowly. As he walked, he said, I didn't follow him into the palace. I heard about what happened later from my grandfather. That night, it began to rain. The autumn rain was cold, as if it wanted to soak into people's hearts. In a few days, it would be the Mid-Autumn Festival. If nothing had happened to Xiao Zhongwu, the Xiao family would be busy preparing for the Mid-Autumn Festival banquet. But now it was bleak and mourning was everywhere. The 3 people at the table were silent. No one wanted to touch the food. Bai Rongwei said warmly, eat a little. If you continue like this, your body won't be able to take it. It was all simple porridge and side dishes. After a moment of silence, Xiao Jing picked up the bowl. He took a sip and put it down. Huaijin, tomorrow morning, I will go to the palace with you. Xiao Ju okay? Bai Rongwei asked. Go to the palace for what? Xiao family has lost their military power. Sooner or later, they will become meat on the chopping board, at the mercy of others. Xiao Jing said. No matter what, the South Mansion soldiers must be returned to the Xiao family. Otherwise, the Xiao family didn't know how long it would last. Then, even if His Majesty returns the military power to us, what will we do in the future? Bai Rongwei said carefully. Ruby, you are the imperial physician. Even if Huaijin joined the military, he is only 16 years old. Xiao Jing's movements stopped. He had to admit that there was no one in the Xiao family. Even if Xiao Ju was talented, he was only 16 years old. He was still a child. How could he lead tens of thousands of soldiers? It would be difficult to convince the public. There are many things a 16-year-old can do. Xiao Ju carelessly picked up food. Big brother, if you are afraid of everything, you will achieve nothing. Xiao Jing sighed. Forget it. Let's take one step at a time. Now there is no other way. Will His Majesty return the military power to us? Bai Rongwei said worriedly. Now that Prime Minister Su's power is overwhelming, he will not let go of this opportunity to deal with the Xiao family. He will. The youth lazily poured tea for them. Don't be afraid. Su Jingfu is only a mortal. No one spoke again. The night rain continued to fall. The servants helped Bai Rongwei and Xiao Jing back to their beds. Xiao Ju stood up, put on his outer clothes and walked out the door. Outside, Fei Nu was waiting. The rain fell on the ground, creating puddles and ripples. The white lanterns hanging at the door were completely soaked. Xiao Ju stopped at the door. Fei Nu said, Young master. He bowed his head and ordered the housekeeper. Take care of them. Let's go. They disappeared into the night. The carriage drove to the palace. In the palace, the current Prime Minister Su Jingfu was playing chess with the Emperor Wen Xuan. A servant came to report, Your Majesty, the second son of General Guangwu's residence requests an audience. Emperor Wen Xuan stopped playing chess. Xiao Huaijin? What is he doing here? Probably because of his father. Su Jingfu laughed. Your Majesty, be careful. He picked up a black stone. You don't play tricks while I'm distracted. Emperor Wen Xuan laughed and scolded, sly. Su Jingfu also laughed. Your Majesty is letting me win. The two of them continued to chat and play chess. They seemed to have forgotten about Xiao Ju. After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the servant came in again to remind. Your Majesty, second son Xiao is still waiting outside the palace. It's still raining outside. If it's raining, then go back. Emperor Wen Xuan was worried about the chess game in front of him. What's he waiting for? Your Majesty, please don't be angry. Su Jingfu said. Second son Zhao's family has undergone a great change. He's still a child. He must be feeling wronged. Why don't you let me go out and persuade him? It's best if I can persuade him to go back. Go. Emperor Wen Xuan waved his hand impatiently. Attending court is Xiao Zhongwu's business, but he can't leave court. Xiao family, I'm tired of hearing it. Let him go back. Go quickly and come back quickly. When you come back, you still have to play this game with me. Su Jingfu stood up and bowed respectfully, yes. When he walked out of the palace, he saw Xiao Ju kneeling at the door. Su Jingfu was over 60 years old. When he was young, he worked in the Hanlin Academy and had students all over the world. Dou Wei's outstanding young man was more or less related to him. Even though Xiao Ju was not his student, he had heard of Xiao Ju's outstanding performance. He had seen Xiao Ju once during the imperial hunt. He also remembered that the white-robed young man's beauty was captivating. He was like a dazzling pearl, and everyone else paled in comparison. Su Jingfu had also sighed in his heart. It would be great if such an outstanding young man was part of the Su family. Unfortunately, Xiao Zhongwu, that barbarian, took advantage of him. He stood in front of Xiao Ju and said, Second son Xiao. The young man raised his head and looked at him. Official Su. It's raining so heavily outside. Why is second son Xiao waiting outside without an umbrella? He ordered the left and right palace servants. Come, bring second son Xiao an umbrella. The palace servants held umbrellas and stood behind Xiao Ju. Su Jingfu made a gesture to help him up, as if he was an elder concerned about the younger generation. He said, "Why are you still kneeling? Hurry and get up." Xiao Ju did not move and said, "I want to see His Majesty." His Majesty is busy right now. If second son Xiao really has something to say, you can come back tomorrow. It's already very late. His Majesty still needs to rest after finishing his work. It's not a good time to see His Majesty. The young man did not move and only repeated, "Official Su, I must see His Majesty today." Su Jingfu took 2 steps back and looked at him with his hands in his sleeves. He also had a benevolent smile on his face. "Second son Xiao, His Majesty is benevolent. Xiao family used to do meritorious deeds and favored you greatly. Now that your father failed in his duty and caused the Dowei soldiers to suffer a crushing defeat at the Battle of Mingshui, he should have pursued this matter. It was His Majesty who gave him a way out on account of their past relationship. How can you be so insatiable and not know what's good for you?" The night rain drifted in from below the umbrella and soaked the young man's clothes. His eyebrows were extremely handsome, and his expression was calm. His voice was no longer lazy and dissolute as he said, "Official Su is right." Su Jingfu's smile did not change. "So," Xiao Ju raised his head and looked at him, "I implore Official Su to make an exception for His Majesty." Xiao Ju wishes to see His Majesty. Second son Xiao must be joking. "Why should I make an exception for His Majesty?" Su Jingfu asked. The young man looked at him and lowered his head slightly. "Please grant my wish, Official Su." A young man's pride was the most fragile. Sometimes his spine would bend slightly and he would not be able to stand up again. If Xiao Zhongwu knew in the underworld and saw his second son, whom he was so proud of, kneeling in front of him and begging for his mercy, what kind of expression would he have? In an instant, Su Jingfu did not want to immediately force him into a dead end. It was much more interesting to see a proud person fall into the mortal world, be trampled into the mud, and have his pride trampled until it was worthless. He raised his head slightly and said in distress, "Second son Xiao, it's not that I don't want to help you. It's just that His Majesty is angry at the Xiao family right now. Even I can't interfere in this matter." Xiao Ju only said, "Please grant my wish, Official Su." Su Jingfu stared at him. After a while he said, "If second son Xiao insists on seeing His Majesty, why don't you accept your punishment first? Xiao family is already guilty. If second son Xiao is willing to go all out and His Majesty sees it, the anger in His Majesty's heart may dissipate a little. This old man will also speak up for second son Xiao. Please advise me, Official Su. You're still young and it's difficult for you to bear more punishment. Go and receive 50 paddles first," he said. These words were said very casually, as if Xiao Ju was already very lenient. The palace servant next to him lowered his head and did not speak, but he could not hide the surprise in his heart. 50 paddles, if one's body was weak, would be enough to kill. Even if it was an ordinary person, 50 paddles would take half their life. It would be difficult for them to recover without recuperating for at least a year. Xiao Ju said, "Okay." Su Jingfu smiled. Second son Xiao is indeed like his father. He turned and ordered his servants, "Take second son Xiao away to receive his paddles." In the night rain, 50 paddles fell on a person. It was not as easy as imagined, especially the palace servant who carried out the punishment. Su Jingfu had specially instructed him. The youth did not make a sound. He gritted his teeth and endured it. After 50 paddles, he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and slowly propped himself up to stand up. When he stood up, his footsteps were a bit weak and he almost fell. The palace servant next to him could not bear to see him like this. Back then, second son Xiao was dressed in brocade and fox fur. He was elegant and gorgeous. Who would have expected him to be in such a sorry state? No one would have expected this. Su Jingfu was not interested in watching Xiao Ju receive his paddles. He entered the hall and first went to speak with Emperor Wen Xuan. Emperor Wen Xuan said, "Didn't you say you wanted to chase him away?" "Your Majesty," Su Jingfu shook his head. "Second son Xiao insisted on seeing Your Majesty." This old official could not persuade him otherwise. Young people are full of vigor. If they really want to do something, even 9 bulls cannot pull them back. Now that General Guangwu is no longer here, and his mother, this old official also feels sorry for him. Your Majesty, why don't you see him and hear what he has to say? If he doesn't speak well, ask him to leave. Next time, we won't meet again. Emperor Wenxuan sighed. My dear official, your heart has softened. It is your Majesty's kindness. Forget it, Emperor Wenxuan ordered the palace servant. In any case, I have watched him grow up. Ask him to come in. The outside of the hall was extremely cold, but the inside of the hall was extremely warm. There was no place to hide from the night rain. There was only the fragrance of flowers that made people dizzy. The lights were bright, and someone walked in. He knelt down in front of Emperor Wenxuan and said, This official kowtows in salute to your Majesty. No need for formalities, Emperor Wenxuan said casually. He raised his eyes to look at Xiaoju. When he saw Xiaoju, he was stunned and asked, How did you become like this? It had been raining outside. The umbrella that Su Jingfu asked the servant to hold up only lasted for less than 15 minutes. His entire body was wet, and he looked extremely miserable. Because he had just been hit 50 times, his body was extremely weak. His face was pale and his lips were pale. It seemed like he would faint at any moment. He was completely different from before. After all, he had watched him grow up. Emperor Wenxuan couldn't help but feel compassion for him. He was genuinely concerned. He softened his tone and said, Tell me, did someone bully you? No. Su Jingfu stood at the side and answered, Second young master Xiao knows that the Xiao family is guilty. He took the 50 strikes to make himself feel better. He also wants your Majesty to know that the Xiao family is remorseful. Emperor Wenxuan looked at him and sighed. 50 strikes is too much. Second young master Xiao is also grateful for your Majesty's kindness, Su Jingfu said with a smile. Why did you come to find me? Emperor Wenxuan said. I don't want to talk about the Xiao family anymore. Xiao Ju's gaze swept across the chessboard on the table. On the chessboard, the black and white pieces intertwined. Under the warm light, it was gloomy and cold. Just like how life was strange, no one could predict what would happen in the future. But the past was the past. Since it was impossible to predict, the future could only be created. The young man prostrated himself. His voice was calm, but with an unstoppable stubbornness, he said word by word. This official begs for your Majesty's permission. I am willing to personally lead the southern army into Mingshui and fight against the southern barbarians.